platform, bringing together a diverse array of stakeholders, esteemed thought leaders, policymakers, and influential business figures. Together, we will explore avenues for collaboration, exchange ideas, and foster dialogue to shape a future where India's economic powers play a vital role in the global arena. Now, to kickstart the day's proceedings, I'd like to call on stage Saurav Majumdar, editor, Business Today, to deliver the welcome address. All right, whilst Saurav joins us on stage, I'd request everyone who's outside enjoying the sights and sounds to please join us inside, because this is going to be an action-packed, jam-packed program. I know a lot of you all enjoyed the last session. We got so much feedback on our Business Today social media handles and all across our platforms, some iconic viral moments. So please keep sharing all of today's happenings on your social media, be it on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We'd love to know what you guys are thinking, what you guys are saying, and be active in the YouTube comment section as well. And without further ado, I will now call upon stage the editor, Business Today, Saurav Majumdar, to deliver the welcome address.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the India Today Group and Business Today, I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to the second edition of the BT India at 100 Summit. When we started this summit as a key initiative of what we call the BT Multiverse last year, it was conceived as a platform for ideas, suggestions, and solutions as India heads towards 2047. This edition of India at 100 could not have come at a better time. As we gather here today, the B20 India Summit is also being held in another part of the city, where business leaders of the G20 are deliberating on the road ahead for the world. And in the next few days, the world's top leaders will descend on India for the G20 Leaders Summit, which will mark the culmination of India's G20 presidency. I must tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that we at Business Today had the privilege of meeting Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier this week. The Prime Minister, who is the prime mover and motivator of India's G20 presidency, spoke eloquently to us about his vision for the presidency and how India is leaving an indelible mark and impression on the world through that. The PM also spoke passionately to us about how India has become the voice of the global South and is pushing for the inclusion of the African Union to secure a permanent membership at the G20. All this reflects one thing. India has taken center stage, and India's dream of a better world is now a global priority. It is not without reason that India is the toast of the global economy today. At a time when serious global headwinds are staring some of the mightiest economies in the face, India is projected by the IMF to grow at 6.1% in FY24 and continue to be the fastest growing major economy. From being the fifth largest economy in 2022, India is projected to move into fourth place in 2025 and into the third place in 2027 as a $5.4 trillion economy as per the IMF. According to a recent State Bank of India report, India's per capita income is expected to increase from 2 lakh in FY23 to 14.9 lakh in FY47. India is likely to add 0.75 trillion in every 2 years, implying that the country is all set to touch $20 trillion by 2047, at least on current numbers. That's not all. The Indian capital market is witnessing serious inflows of foreign funds this year as global fund managers bet on the India opportunity. The world's biggest corporate houses see the country as a stable economy where serious efforts are underway to further ease the business environment. India is also emerging as a manufacturing hub in its own right. The share of manufacturing in India's GDP is also expected to rise by 2047 by a significant amount. I would particularly like to underscore one aspect where India is truly showing the way. The India Stack, India's digital public infrastructure, is the nation's pride. Whether it is Aadhaar, UPI, Jandhan, or the ability to deliver last mile benefits to the people by way of technology, India's digital infrastructure is being acknowledged by the world as the global world standard. We welcome the Honorable Minister, Gadkari ji. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the basis. This digital public infrastructure is the basis of creating an inclusive and transparent economy. And India is well on the road to achieving that. Our startup ecosystem is now the third biggest in the world, and even here, our digital prowess is being leveraged by young entrepreneurs to create cutting-edge solutions for the future. That's not to say there are no challenges for India on the road to 2047. The challenge of providing employment to those entering the job market in the coming years is real. And we will need to focus on skilling our population so that the right jobs find the right people to do them. As new technologies like AI become all pervasive, these will present both opportunities and challenges which will need to be navigated and regulated. Then there is the net zero challenge, where Prime Minister Modi is once again driving an aggressive agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, over the course of the day, we will have several eminent speakers and panelists, policymakers, corporate leaders, and thinkers who will discuss the opportunities and road ahead for India over the next 25 years. I'm sure you will have several important takeaways from this summit, and individuals, corporations, and policymakers will work on them to come up with solutions for the future. But as India has shown just this week with its moon landing, nothing is impossible when the ambition of 140 crore Indians powers it. India will reach its destination. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurav, for that welcome address. Now it's time for the moment we've all been waiting for, the launch of our special Business Today magazine issue dedicated to India's G20 presidency. The highlight of this issue is an exclusive interview with the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji. Under India's leadership, the G20 presidency has been a beacon of hope and diplomacy. In this exclusive interview, Prime Minister Modi provides invaluable insights into India's global role. We are honored to have Shri Nitin Gadkari ji with us today to launch this issue, a man dedicated to India's development and innovation. I'd now like to call upon stage Shri Nitin Gadkari ji, Union Minister for Road Transport and Highways, Arun Puri, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief, India Today Group, Saurav Majumdar, Editor, Business Today, Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today TV, Alok Nair, Chief Operating Officer, Business Today, and Rahul Kanwal, News Director, India Today Television and Aaj Tak, Executive Director at Business Today. Gentlemen, can we please have you on stage for this special moment, the issue unveiling. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause, please. Shri Gadkari ji, can I request you to stay on stage, sir, uh, for the next session? Thank you so much, sir, for joining us as we set the stage for the next big session. And we're going to be kick-starting the day with an absolute, well, crowd puller of a session, Building Tomorrow's Roads Today. In this session, we will focus on India's infrastructure development journey, particularly how the road infrastructure sector can play a pivotal role in India's journey towards global leadership in infrastructure and transportation by 2047. Remember, the theme of this particular summit is achieving global leadership by 2047. This is India's moment. And the first session with Shri Gadkari ji will be moderated by Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today TV. Can we have a huge round of applause for our first session at the Business Today India at 100 Summit?
Hello and a very warm welcome once again. Good morning, namaskar, adab. Thank you very much for being here with us. Nitin Gadkari ji, as always, a great pleasure to have you here with us. He's taken the pains to come only for this event, straight from the airport. So thank you very much for that as well. A full house here. And Gadkari ji, the topic is India at 100. So I will try and not ask you questions of the present and the past. One of your ambitions, Gadkari ji, as someone we describe here as the builder of modern India, uh, is your Kashmir to Kanyakumari highway. But again, I will not ask you about that. Try and tell our audience here, when India is 100 years as a republic, what will our road infrastructure look like?
Actually, before end of 24, our national highway road infrastructure will be equal to the USA standard. So I am very much confident about it. For example, in Delhi, we are just working Delhi and out of Delhi part that we are working on the project of 65,000 crores. I've got the list of every project, and I am confident that we will complete all the projects. After that, from Delhi to Dehradun will be 2 hours, Delhi to Haridwar 1.5 hours, Delhi to Jaipur 2 hours, Delhi to Chandigarh 2.5 hours, Chandigarh to Manali presently take 7 to 8 hours, it will be 3 hours. Then Delhi to Amritsar 4 hours, Delhi to Katra 6 hours, Delhi to Srinagar 8 hours, Delhi to Mumbai 12 hours, then Chennai to Bangalore 2 hours, Bangalore to Mysore is already completed is 1 hour, and in which we are developing the road infrastructure, particularly starting from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Just you take it from Manali. Before that Atal Tunnel, from going to Rohtang Pass, it takes something 3.5 hours. Now it is 8 minutes. After coming with Atal Tunnel, we are constructing 5 tunnels and roads up to Ladakh and Leh. After Ladakh and Leh, we are constructing the big tunnel in Asia, 11 kilometer, that is to be Jojila. 70% work has completed. Then after that, Jhedmore tunnel is completed. It is on the, we want to open it as early as possible now. Then it comes to Srinagar. Then Srinagar to Jammu, we are already constructing 18 tunnels, out of which 14 are completed. And before Katra, there is a highway, Delhi Katra highway. It comes to Amritsar, Amritsar to Delhi, and then it comes to directly to Delhi Mumbai Express Highway. And after Delhi Mumbai, after it goes to up to Surat. Then for South India, from North India to South India, you don't need to go to Pune or Mumbai. From Surat, it will start it going to Nasik, Nasik to Ahmednagar, Ahmednagar to Solapur, Solapur to Kurnool, and Kurnool se Trivandrum, Cochin, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Bangalore, Chennai, and Kanyakumari. So it starts from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, express highway, axis control, the link between the countries.
Kashmir to Kanyakumari, the question that I want to ask you in a lighter note is, सर कुछ जमीन बची रहेगी, सब कुछ हाईवे, सुपर हाईवे, एक्सप्रेसवेज ही ले जाएगा पूरे कंट्री में?
नहीं नहीं, कहाँ उतना है देश में। 63 लाख किलोमीटर रोड लेंथ है। आउट ऑफ इस एनएच, अभी मैं जब मंत्री बना तो 92,000 किलोमीटर था, अभी 1,46,000 किलोमीटर है। तो ये अभी भी 1 आध लाख किलोमीटर और करने की आवश्यकता है। ट्रैफिक डेंसिटी इज गुड, इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी इज गुड, इवन वी कैन वर्क ऑन बीओटी, ऑन पीपीपी मोड, देर इज नो प्रॉब्लम।
Sir, we will have a great spread of highways, great expressway network, and many times the statistics are mind-boggling. But will our highways be much safer? I ask you this because our highways, roads have one of the highest fatality rates. You yourself have tried a lot in the last 10 years, but 2 decades later, how safe will India's highways be?
एक बात मैं आपको बता दूं, जो आपने 100 ईयर्स की बात की थी,
जी,
मैं हाईवे को इलेक्ट्रिक हाईवे बना रहा हूँ। और अभी कल ही मेरे पास काफी काम पूरा हुआ है, टाटा से प्रेजेंटेशन भी हुआ। मैं दिल्ली से जयपुर और नागपुर के रिंग रोड को इलेक्ट्रिक केबल जैसे रेलवे की होती है वैसी बना रहा हूँ।
अंडरग्राउंड?
नो नो,
हाँ,
ऊपर में।
अच्छा,
और 2 या 3 बसेस, ट्रॉली बसेस उसके ऊपर चलेंगी दिल्ली से जयपुर, और जयपुर से रिंग रोड पर घूमकर फिर वापस दिल्ली आएगी। और अभी नागपुर में भी उसको कर रहा हूँ, तो ये पहला पायलट प्रोजेक्ट है। और ये मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि दिल्ली से जयपुर बीओटी में हो सकता है क्या। और फिर मेरी विजन ये है कि फिर ट्रक भी ऐसे बनेंगे, जैसे रेलवे का इंजन होता है ना, ऊपर में लगकर केबल पे चलता है, तो 2-2, 3-3 ट्रक भी उसी पे चलेंगे। और लॉजिस्टिक कॉस्ट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। प्रेजेंटली अवर लॉजिस्टिक कॉस्ट इज 14 to 16%। चाइना इट इज 9 to 10%, and European country 12%. I am confident at end of 24, our logistic cost will be in single digit. It will come up to 9%. So we will be more competitive in international market for export, and that is going to be a great boost for our economy, and which is very important. And the second thing about road safety,
जी,
from last 9 years, I am trying my level best, but this is not a success story. We have every year 5 lakhs accidents, 1,50,000 deaths, and out of which 60% deaths belong to the age group of 18 to 34. It's very unfortunate. But there are 4-5 reasons are important. One is automobile engineering, and other is road engineering. We have taken a lot of steps regarding automobile engineering. Just 4 days before, we have launched star rating of international standard. So you will get the car with the international standard, there will be no problem. At the same time, there are road engineering, there was some black spots. We are already spending 40,000 crore for improvement of black spots. We are taking all preventive measures of international standards, from signage to marking, and even lot of things we are now making the road safety audit of the every road. For that reason, now we have prepared the syllabus, and we are taking the help from the IIT, Engineering College, Polytechnic College for making road safety audit. But the other important thing is regarding road accident is education, emergency, and enforcement. Regarding enforcement, we have already have the new motor vehicle act. For that reason, we have increased the fines and all the things are there. Regarding education is very important. The behavior of the common man is the basic reason for the road accident.
sir, is it just the common man or is it also the rich man? Just hours ago, we have had a very horrific accident. Some many cars convoy, one of the biggest and safest, most expensive cars in the world, hitting a truck. Nothing happened. It was not the fault of the truck, from what we know as of news reports. It is it just an attitude that everyone has on our
I'm
highways?
just telling you a simple example of Merit Express Highway just 20 days before. The wrong side, the school bus driver has taken his bus on wrong side, and there was SUVs there. There was a crash and 6 deaths. Now, first of all, the most important thing is there is no fear about the law. and no respect for the law in the majority people's mind. And that is to be a big problem. Somewhere you should not talk on the phone when you are driving car or the scooter. Should have helmet. If the red signal is there, you should stop there. You should lane discipline is very important. This is a big country, but now the people are not. Now it's a very unfortunate for us. Majority of the accidents, the reason is lane discipline, and that is one of the reason that we want to implement the law. Now we have cameras, everything. New intelligent traffic system is with us, but presently the situation is that still we are not up to the mark. That is to be a big problem. We are highest in the world in road accident. Somewhere this is a issue where we need help from universities, education institutions, NGOs, media. We are making campaign. We want to change the mindset of the people about the rules of the road. And now we are starting competition in the schools. Now we want to train the school children because they are the citizen of the future. So these are the problems, but we are trying. But the fact is that we are not very much satisfied about it. We are working on it.
सर, भारत चांद पे भी पहुंच गया है और जो आपने बात कही है काफी चिंताजनक है, क्योंकि चांद पे पहुंच गए पर यहाँ पे लेन डिसिप्लिन नहीं रख पा रहे हैं। गडकरी जी, वन ऑफ द
आपको एक बात बताऊं,
जी
ये सब दिल्ली के लोग बैठे हैं।
जी
अब मेरा बोलने में थोड़ा मैं स्पष्ट हूँ, आप करो। इनको पूछो, आप क्या इतने बड़े बड़े बंगले बनाते हो, मर्सिडीज गाड़ी दो दो चार चार रखते हो, तो घर के अंदर पार्किंग बनाते हो? पूरी गाड़ी
एक भी
जैसे
हाथ
हमने
नहीं खड़ा।
रोड इनके पार्किंग के लिए बनाया, पूरे लाइन पे लगा के रख। अब ये बड़े लोग भी क्या क्या फर्क पड़ता है कि अंडरग्राउंड पार्किंग बना?
तो फिर सर इसका अर्थ ये हुआ कि सड़कें छोटी होनी चाहिए, जैसे बॉम्बे में तो सड़कें ही नहीं है, तो क्या उसी से सेफ्टी बढ़ेगी क्या?
नहीं, देखो प्रॉब्लम है कि रोड के दोनों बाजू में डेवलपमेंट हुई।
हम्म।
अभी गोवा और केरल तो दो राज्य ऐसे हैं कि हमारे हाईवे के बाजू में ही डेवलपमेंट है। हमारी कॉस्ट इन किलोमीटर इन केरला 49 करोड़ रुपीस पर किलोमीटर लैंड एक्विजिशन। हमारे केरल के मुख्यमंत्री ने कहा कि मैं कंट्रीब्यूट करूंगा, 25,000 करोड़ दिए और मुझे आए मिलने के लिए। बोले सर हाथ जोड़ता हूँ, अभी मेरे से नहीं हो सकता। तो ये प्रॉब्लम है। और दूसरी बात, ये जो पार्किंग का प्रॉब्लम है, अभी पहले रोड की विड्थ कम, उसमें ये पार्किंग खड़ा होगा तो कैसे होगा?
तो सर 25 साल बाद क्या होगा? ऐसे ये तो बहुत भयानक, बहुत डरावना एक सॉर्ट ऑफ सिनेरियो बन रहा है। गाड़ियां भी आ रही हैं, बड़े बड़े बंगले बन रहे हैं, बड़ी बड़ी हाई राइजेस बन रही हैं। जो बॉम्बे का हाल है, क्या वो पूरे देश का हाल होने वाला है?
अभी मैं नागपुर में मैंने एक म्यूजिकल फाउंटेन बनाया और वहाँ एक 11 मंजिले में फूड प्लाजा बना रहा हूँ, पार्किंग और फूड प्लाजा। उसमें 1100 गाड़ियों का ऑटोमेटिक पार्किंग किया है। अब धीरे धीरे लोगों में अवेयरनेस आ रहा है, पब्लिक प्लेसेस में पार्किंग आ रहे हैं। और मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं अब इसकी जरूरत है। अभी मैं मनाली का देखने के लिए गया था, ये बहुत नुकसान हुआ। वहाँ पूरे मनाली में इतने पूरे लोग, जिधर देखो उधर गाड़ियां दिखती है। अब उसमें हाई राइज पार्किंग, ऑटोमेटिक पार्किंग करने पड़ेंगे। मैं अपने डिपार्टमेंट से बस पोर्ट, पार्किंग प्लाजा, हाँ, उसके साथ कुछ कमर्शियल जोड़ना पड़ेगा, तो कोशिश कर रहा हूँ। ये होगा, पर कभी ना कभी लोगों के सहयोग के बिना नहीं हो सकता।
लोगों का सहयोग बहुत आवश्यक है। गडकरी जी, इन द लास्ट 10-12 मिनट्स यू हैव गिवन अस अ विजन ऑफ दैट हाउ मच वी विल हैव इन टर्म्स ऑफ हाईवेज, but it's also clear that road safety will continue to be a bigger issue. I want to come to another aspect which is related to this great ambitious work that you are doing, which is costs. The government is bearing the cost, the NHAI is bearing the cost. You have said several times, और हमारे ही ग्रुप के मंचों पे आपने लगातार कहा है कि पैसे की कोई कमी नहीं है बनाने में. But consumer behavior also says that many people are not willing to pay those tolls, and they say that इतनी महंगी कर दी है सड़क पे यात्रा, 25 साल बाद तो इससे फिर 4-5 गुना हो जाएगा अगर इन्फ्लेशन इंक्रीज लिंक्ड इंक्रीज हो टोल में.
आपके कार्यक्रम में बहुत पहले कह चुका हूँ। अब आपने ये 5 स्टार होटल में कार्यक्रम लिया तो कॉस्ट है उसकी। रामलीला का ऑप्शन था मैदान का। वहां भी बैठ जाते, चाय पीते करा। देखिए सर, इफ यू वांट गुड सर्विसेज यू हैव टू पे फॉर इट। अभी मुंबई पुणे के बीच में 9 घंटे लगते थे, अभी रोड में 2 घंटा होता है। तो 7 घंटे अगर गाड़ी कम चलती है तो पेट्रोल डीजल बचता नहीं है। यू हैव टू पे। अभी मुझे बताइए, आप दिल्ली से जयपुर अगर 2 घंटे में जाएंगे, अब 3.5-4 घंटे लगते हैं, आपका डीजल पेट्रोल नहीं बचेगा। और इसलिए अगर अच्छी सर्विसेज चाहिए तो अमेरिका में भी टोल है। अब मैं लाखों करोड़ के रोड बना रहा हूँ। दूसरी बात, रिसोर्सेज का कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं। और अभी तो मैंने तय किया है, मैं अच्छा हुआ आपके यहाँ ये बता रहा हूँ कि अब मैं गरीब लोगों के पैसे से रोड बनाना चाहता हूँ। मैंने अभी इनविट मॉडल में ये मुंबई स्टॉक एक्सचेंज में लॉन्च किया था, साहब बैठे, तो 7 दिन का टाइम था और मैं पहले दिन 7 घंटे में 7 टाइम्स ओवर सब्सक्राइब हुआ हमारा बॉन्ड इशू जो हम इनविट में कर रहे थे। तो मुझे फोन आया हमारे मेंबर फाइनेंस का कि साहब जल्दी आओ, इनकी आप पद्धत होती है वो घंटा बजाकर क्लोज करना होता है। मैं आया दौड़ते हुए गोवा से और मैंने क्लोज किया, क्योंकि हम लोग 8.05% इंटरेस्ट पर ईयर दे रहे एश्योर्ड। फिर मैंने उसमें सुधार किया कि ये ईयरली नहीं, मंथली अकाउंट में जमा करेंगे। अब मुझे बताओ बैंक में फिक्स डिपॉजिट का रेट क्या, और हमारा 8.05 विथ NHI ट्रिपल ए रेटिंग। तो मैं अब छोटे लोगों से पैसे ले रहा हूँ, पैसे की कोई कमी नहीं। मैं आपको बता दूं, मैं तो आप तो पूछ भी नहीं सकते मुझे, मैं आज तक 10 साल हो रहे मेरे मंत्री पद में, मैं बोलता हूँ कितने लाखों करोड़ में मैं बात करता था। लोगों को पहले लगता था पॉलिटिशियन है, बोलते ही है। अब मैं आप जैसे लोगों को पूछता हूँ, मुझे बताओ कि आज तक 10 साल में मैंने बोला करोड़ों में कौन सा काम नहीं हुआ, मुझे बताओ। इसका कारण आई एम कॉन्फिडेंट, आई डोंट हैव मनी प्रॉब्लम। और आपको कल बताता हूँ, कल मेरे यहाँ अमेरिका से डेलीगेशन आया था पूरे इन्वेस्टर का। मैंने उनको चाय कॉफी पिलाया और मैंने बोला आप पूछने के पहले मैं थोड़ा कुछ बताऊं, आप गलत फहमी मत करना। मैंने बोला पहली बात, गवर्नमेंट गारंटी दूंगा नहीं। दूसरी बात, NHI के क्रेडिट पर पैसा देना है तो दो, नहीं देना है तो मत दो, समय खराब मत करो। तीसरी बात, आपको पैसा देने में मैं अगर आपको चाहिए तो आप बोले उस बैंक में एक्स्ट्रो अकाउंट खोल दूंगा। आपको रिटर्न्स ईयरली चाहिए, 3 मंथली चाहिए, मंथली चाहिए, वीकली चाहिए या डेली चाहिए, रोज पैसा जमा करूंगा, रोज इनकम मिलेगा। एस्क्रो अकाउंट में पहला राइट तुम्हारा। और ये चीजें मान्य होगी तो मेरे से डिस्कस करो, नहीं तो मैं आपका बहुत आभारी हूँ। आप चाय पानी करो, नमस्कार।
तो उन्होंने पोहा खा के कुछ और बोला सर कि चले गए?
नहीं, वो खुश हुए, क्योंकि क्या है कि सब होता है रामायण, और फिर आखिरी में सवाल आता है भारत सरकार की गारंटी मिलेगी क्या। वो मिलाते मिलाते मुझे साल भर लगता है। आई डोंट वेस्ट माय टाइम एंड आई डोंट वांट टू कन्विंस टू एवरीबॉडी कि ये कैसे है। मेरे क्रेडेंशियल्स पर देना है तो दो, नहीं तो देखो मेरा अभी टोल इनकम 44,000 करोड़ है। एट द एंड ऑफ 24 आवर टोल इनकम विल बी 1,40,000 करोड़, और मैं रोड मॉनिटाइज कर रहा हूँ, और मेरा कोई प्रोजेक्ट इकोनॉमिकली नॉन वायबल नहीं है, मेरा पूरा प्रॉफिट का ही धंधा है।
एब्सोल्युटली। एंड एंड गडकरी जी, हमने भी पोहा खाया है घर में चाय के साथ, इसलिए मैं जानता हूँ
नहीं, ये
कि
उनको मैं उनका रिस्पेक्ट करता हूँ। ये कैनेडियन फंड, पेंशन फंड अभी इनविट मॉडल में आए ना, पर वो आजकल क्या होता है कि जब फंड्स आते थे पहले तो बोलते गवर्नमेंट गारंटी, तो वो गवर्नमेंट गारंटी लेते लेते वो प्रोसीजर इतना बड़ा होता है कि उसमें रिजर्व बैंक और वो सब करके बहुत समय जाता है। तो हमारा ट्रिपल ए रेटिंग है भाई, देना है तो दो, नहीं तो हमारे पास पैसे की कमी नहीं।
absolutely. And I can tell the audience and our viewers that in the
इवन आपको एक बात बताता हूँ, 2 बैंकों के चेयरमैन का विवाद हुआ, नेशनलाइज बैंकों का। ये बोल रहा मेरे 25,000 करोड़ लो, वो बोल रहा मेरे, दोनों मुझे फोन कर रहे सर हमारे पैसे लो। फिर मैंने धीरे से बोला वो इतना इंटरेस्ट कोट कर रहा, तुम 0.5 कम करो।
I was going to say that in the first year of taking over, uh, Gadkari ji cut through so much red tape in the bureaucracy, and I know he still does that. But Gadkari ji, the question that I have in the backdrop, as you know, you have yourself revealed and unveiled that edition of Business Today. This is the first time that Pradhan Mantri ji has given an interview on G20 in which he has spoken about so many things. And one of the things that I want you to reflect upon is the confidence that India has now, that it is not taking from the world, it wants to give to the world. Two questions, sir. इतना कॉन्फिडेंस आप में आता कैसे है आया कहाँ से कि इतना बड़ा विजन हम सड़कों का, परिवहन का बनाएं। एंड सेकेंड, आपने अमेरिका और कनाडा का उदाहरण दिया, ये परिवर्तन भी कैसे आया है कि अब वो लोग आके हमसे बात करते हैं।
देखिए, पहली बात तो ऐसी है कि हमारी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट को, वाटर, पावर, ट्रांसपोर्ट एंड कम्युनिकेशन, इसको प्रधानमंत्री जी ने हाईएस्ट प्रायोरिटी दी है। और आप तो बिजनेस के इसमें हो तो आप जानते हो कि इस देश में वाटर, पावर, ट्रांसपोर्ट, कम्युनिकेशन होगा तो कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट आएगी, इंडस्ट्री आएगी। कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट और इंडस्ट्री आएगी तो गवर्नमेंट का रेवेन्यू बढ़ेगा और एम्प्लॉयमेंट पोटेंशियल क्रिएट होगा। और एम्प्लॉयमेंट पोटेंशियल क्रिएट हुआ तो ग्रोथ भी बढ़ेगी और गरीबी दूर होगी। और इसलिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में बड़े प्रमाण पर प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में हमारी सरकार ने प्राथमिकता दी। आपको याद होगा कि मैं पहले शिपिंग मंत्री था, तो मेरा बजट था 700 करोड़ का। कैन यू बिलीव? मैंने जो सागरमाला प्रोजेक्ट तैयार किया था वो था 16 लाख करोड़ का। और आप लोग जरूर कुछ प्रोजेक्ट का आप एक स्टडी करिए कि 16 लाख करोड़ के प्रोजेक्ट में 11 लाख करोड़ के काम पूरे हुए सागरमाला में, और जबकि हमारा केवल बजट था 700 करोड़ का, और 6000 करोड़ रुपए 12 मेजर पोर्ट को प्रॉफिट मिला। ये अभी एक मैंने मथुरा का मॉडल कहता हूँ, जो जरूर आप इसको स्टडी करिए कि जो सॉलिड वेस्ट और लिक्विड वेस्ट है इसमें भी पब्लिक प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट संभव है। तो मथुरा में 90 MLD जो स्लज थी, वही वाटर रिसोर्स मंत्री था, और हाइब्रिड एन्युटी में हमने टेंडर निकाला, त्रिवेणी इंजीनियरिंग करके कंपनी ने लिया, और मैंने एक ऐसा मॉडल तैयार किया कि वो शुद्ध पानी तैयार करेंगे। और वो इंडियन ऑयल जो बाजू में रिफाइनरी मथुरा की, उन्होंने खरीदने की तैयारी बताई। मैंने उनको पूछा कि आप पैसा, पानी कितना लगता है, कितना पैसा देते हो? उन्होंने कहा उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार से डैम से पानी लेते 25 करोड़ देते। उन्होंने बोला आप 20 करोड़ दो, 5 करोड़ आपके बच गए। और वो पूरा पानी रिफाइनरी यूज कर रही है, और 40% सरकार ने दिया, 60% इन्वेस्टर ने लाया, और पहली बार लिक्विड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट में भी PPP मॉडल सक्सेसफुल हुआ। तो मुझे लगता है अभी मेरे पास स्टेट ट्रांसपोर्ट बसेस है। मैं इसके आप सब इन्वेस्टर को प्रार्थना करता हूं कि मुंबई में एक डीजल की बस चलती है, पर किलोमीटर कॉस्ट 115, और जब हम सब्सिडी दे रहे थे तब हमारे नॉन AC बस की कीमत आई 39 रुपीज पर किलोमीटर, और AC बस की आई 41 रुपीज पर किलोमीटर। अब इलेक्ट्रिक बस जो है, जो लिथियम आयन की बस है, जिसकी कीमत 1 करोड़ 10 लाख 15 लाख है, वो बस अगर हम लाएंगे तो उसकी कीमत विदाउट सब्सिडी हमको 60 रुपीज पर किलोमीटर आएगी। और जो ट्रॉली बस है जो केबल पर चलाएंगे तो उसकी कीमत जो है वो 60 लाख रुपए आएगी। तो कैपिटल कॉस्ट कम है और बिजली भी कम लगेगी। तो मैं अभी पावर मिनिस्टर को रिक्वेस्ट कर रहा हूँ कि मुझे आप NTPC से सस्ते में बिजली दो पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट इलेक्ट्रिसिटी के लिए, तो मुझे कॉस्ट और कम होगी। तो मैं अभी एक, मेरे पास रूरल ट्रांसपोर्ट मेरे पास है और अर्बन ट्रांसपोर्ट UD मिनिस्ट्री के पास है। तो स्टेट ट्रांसपोर्ट के सब घाटे में है, वाह हॉर्न छोड़कर सब बचता है गाड़ी में। हाँ गाड़ियां खराब है। तो मैंने सबको कहा कि आप इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ी AC लगा दो, टिकट रेट 30% कम कर दो, ड्राइवर ऑपरेटर का और कंडक्टर कारपोरेशन का, और कंडक्टर भी नहीं, जो कार्ड होगा चढ़ते समय और उतरते समय कार्ड दिखाओ। देखो चोरी होती है डीजल में और टिकट में, दोनों निकाल दिए हमने। इलेक्ट्रिक की चोरी हो नहीं सकती। और जो कार्ड है वो लगाने से कंडक्टर जेब में पैसा, कार्ड मैंडेटरी है जैसे टेलीफोन का है। तो मैं आपको बताता हूँ, हर दिन एक्स्ट्रा अकाउंट खोल के एक बस 50,000 रुपए का डेली बिजनेस करेंगी, 250 किलोमीटर चलेगी, तो वो बस वालों को 15,000 रुपए उसके लिए रख देंगे। बाकी के 35,000 में कंडक्टर, ड्राइवर, बाकी सब खर्चा होने के बाद भी 15-20 हजार प्रॉफिट होगा। तो इस देश में कम से कम 5 लाख इलेक्ट्रिक बसेस आज पब्लिक प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट से, जैसे दिल्ली टू चंडीगढ़, दिल्ली टू शिमला, दिल्ली टू जयपुर, अभी दिल्ली टू शिमला इलेक्ट्रिक बस चल रही है। और एयर कंडीशन लग्जरी बस और डीजल बस की तुलना में 30% रेट कम करके ये पूरा अर्बन और पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट इलेक्ट्रिक पे आएगा। तो ये कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव है, पोल्यूशन फ्री है, इंडिजिनस है और कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव है, विन विन सिचुएशन है। लोगों के AC में जाएंगे, 30% टिकट रेट कम होगा, और जो जिसको इन्वेस्ट करेगा वो भी पैसा कमाएगा। तो ये ऐसी बहुत सी बातें हैं कि अनेक फील्ड में हम लोग ये काम कर सकते हैं।
सर, सिंस यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इलेक्ट्रिक फ्यूचर, आई वांट टू आस्क यू, 25 साल बाद पेट्रोल डीजल बचेगा इंडिया में? गाड़ी पेट्रोल डीजल की सब इलेक्ट्रिक हाइब्रिड होगा?
दुनिया का क्या होगा मालूम नहीं, पर मैं 2004 से बात कर रहा हूँ और मेरा ये एम्बिशन है, ये बहुत कठिन है, डिफिकल्ट है, पर असंभव नहीं है। इसके बारे में मैं कोई एश्योरेंस नहीं दे रहा हूँ। और मेरा बस चल जाए तो 5 साल के अंदर इस देश से फॉसिल फ्यूल को खत्म कर देना। और ये दिल्ली में कितना पोल्यूशन है, 40% पोल्यूशन दिल्ली का जो है वो पेट्रोल डीजल का, फॉसिल फ्यूल का।
खत्म कर देंगे यानी गाड़ी बैन हो जाएंगी पेट्रोल डीजल?
नहीं जी, जरूरत ही नहीं है। आपके पास गाड़ी है पेट्रोल की, इलेक्ट्रिक की कार ले लो, आप 30,000 रुपए खर्चा कर रहे हो, आपका खर्चा 2,000 रुपये आएगा। तो मुझे जरूरत ही नहीं मार्केटिंग
बट
करने की।
इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ी महंगी भी है।
मैं आया हूं अभी गाड़ी में, इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ी है, हाइड्रोजन की गाड़ी है मेरे पास। हाइड्रोजन इज द फ्यूचरिस्टिक फ्यूल। और आपको बताता हूँ, पेट्रोल डीजल की तुलना में नो पोल्यूशन, इकोनॉमिक। अभी मैं 29 को टोयोटो की फ्लेक्स इंजन इनोवा लॉन्च कर रहा हूं दिल्ली में। अब 100% इथेनॉल पर है। अब पेट्रोल का रेट है 120 रुपए, इथेनॉल का 60 रुपए, और वो कार 40% बिजली तैयार करेगी। टोयोटो के सब मॉडल आ रहे हैं इसमें, और 40% बिजली फ्री ऑफ चार्ज। तो पेट्रोल का रेट एवरेज माइलेज को हिसाब में लगाते हुए 15 से 20 रुपए लीटर आएगा। तो मुझे क्या जरूरत है इनको कहने की और आपको कि ये ले करके।
तो
हाँ, एक ही केवल जो आपका प्रश्न है, शुरुआत में जब नंबर कम होगा तो कॉस्ट थोड़ी ज्यादा होगी, जैसे जैसे नंबर बढ़ेगा कॉस्ट कम हो गया। अभी जैसे लिथियम आयन बैटरी, इसकी कीमत थी $150 पर किलोवाट पर आवर, अब $115 पर किलोवाट पर आवर आई। और मेरा विश्वास है कि आने वाले 1-1.5 साल के अंदर लिथियम आयन बैटरी की कीमत ये $100 पर किलोवाट पर आवर आएगी। तो मैं आपको बता दूं, पेट्रोल और डीजल की कार की कीमत सेम होगी, और इसके कारण लोग इलेक्ट्रिक कार, हाइड्रोजन कार यूज करेंगे। आपको और एक अच्छी बात बताता हूं, मैं जब मंत्री बना तब ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री जो थी उसका टर्नओवर 7.5 लाख था। आज हमारा टर्नओवर 9.5 लाख करोड़ है। और दिस इज द इंडस्ट्री जिसने सबसे ज्यादा जीएसटी भारत सरकार को और राज्य सरकार को दिया है। और आज अभी ये इंडस्ट्री 9.5 लाख करोड़ की है। जब मैं मंत्री बना तो हम 7वें नंबर पे थे, आज हम तीसरे नंबर पर है। पहले नंबर पर चाइना है, दूसरे नंबर पर यूएसए है, तीसरे नंबर पर अभी जापान था। हमने जापान को पीछे डालकर हम तीसरे नंबर पर आए, जापान चौथे नंबर पर है। और मैं आपको बताता हूं कि हमको 15 लाख करोड़ की इंडस्ट्री बनानी है। 5 साल के अंदर हमारी ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री, यही आत्मनिर्भर भारत और प्रधानमंत्री जो कहते हैं कि हम प्रगति और विकास की ओर दुनिया में आगे जाएंगे, इसका प्रूफ है कि हम 5 साल के अंदर 15 लाख करोड़ की ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री बनेंगे और वर्ल्ड में हम पहले नंबर तक पहुंचने की स्थिति में आ रहे हैं। यही हर फील्ड में होगा।
That's a very important point, Gadkari ji, and one of the clear-cut headlines that you are giving us is that petrol diesel vehicles will get phased out hopefully in 5 years.
नहीं, ये एक बात याद रखिए, क्योंकि कभी कभी मीडिया वाले की फिर मेरे नाम पर अलग डाल देते, इसलिए क्लियर हो जाए। ये मेरा उद्दिष्ट है, ये मेरी इच्छा है, और ये पूरा ही होगा ऐसा मैं नहीं कह रहा हूँ। मैं ट्राई करूंगा। आज तक मेरा 100% रिकॉर्ड ऐसा है
जी,
जो मैंने कहा वो हुआ है। ये भी होने के लिए इन सब की दुआएं मिल जाएगी तो हो जाएगा।
एक आखिरी छोटा सा प्रश्न, पिछली बारी जब आए थे तो मैंने आपसे पूछा था कि टोल से एग्जेम्पशन बहुत लोगों को मिल रहा है। आपने कहा था कुछ चीजों पे बात की नहीं जा सकती, देयर आर थिंग्स व्हिच वन कैन नॉट टॉक अबाउट। सिंस देन हैव यू हैड एनी चांस टू एंश्योर दैट एवरीवन पेज टोल इन दिस कंट्री?
सर, मैंने 10 साल में एक को भी कंसेशन नहीं दिया।
सर, बड़े बड़े बोर्ड अभी भी लगे हुए हैं।
नहीं, ऐसा है, वो पहले मेरे पास मांगे पत्रकारों को टोल में कंसेशन, फिर पत्रकार के बाद स्वातंत्र संग्राम सैनिक, फिर दिव्यांग आएगा, फिर कोई बोलेगा शेड्यूल कास्ट को दो, फिर बोले शेड्यूल ट्राइब को दो, फिर ओबीसी को दो, फिर सरकारी कर्मचारी को दो, सबको दो तो टोल क्या होगा? तो ये मैं पेंडोरम बॉक्स खोला ही नहीं। मैं साफ बोल रहा हूँ, कोई कंसेशन मिलेगा नहीं। मैं आपकी बचत करके दूंगा, आपका समय बचेगा, आपका फ्यूल बचेगा, और इफ यू वांट गुड सर्विसेज यू हैव टू पे फॉर इट। पर एक बात आपको बताता हूँ, हमने अभी फास्टैग शुरू किया, हमारा 98.6% फास्टैग पेनिट्रेट हुआ। तो जो 78 सेकंड लगते थे, वो अब 23 सेकंड पे आए। और 3 महीने के अंदर मैं सैटेलाइट बेस टोल सिस्टम ला रहा हूं, जिसमें आपको कोई अटकाएगा नहीं, कोई रोकेगा नहीं। आप जहां से एंट्री करोगे वहां से आपके नंबर प्लेट और फास्टैग का फोटो निकल जाएगा, जहां से बाहर जाओगे वहां से निकल जाएगा, और आपके बैंक अकाउंट से उतना पैसा माइनस हो जाएगा। आपको हमारे पास आने की जरूरत नहीं, हम आपके पास आएंगे नहीं। और बहुत ही सिंपल मेथोडोलॉजी, कहीं रुकने की जरूरत नहीं, कोई तकलीफ नहीं, कोई रुकेगा।
गडकरी जी, मैं और नहीं पूछना चाहता क्योंकि और कहां से पैसा निकलेगा उसकी बात भी हो सकती है। आपने समय दिया, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर योर टाइम। राउंड ऑफ अप्लॉज फॉर नितिन गडकरी, द बिल्डर ऑफ मॉडर्न इंडिया।
थैंक यू।
What an absolutely amazing session. Gadkari ji, I request you to stay on stage. I'd like to call on stage Dinesh Bhatia, Group CEO, India Today Group, and Shashikaran Shetty, Chairman at All Cargo, to express a token of our gratitude. A huge round of applause, please. Thank you, sir. And the next session is something you've all been waiting for. Honestly, as a tech enthusiast and tech geek, this is one I'll be taking notes for. How can AI change India and the world? In this fireside chat, we'll explore AI-driven opportunities for growth, innovation, and competitiveness, while also discussing responsible deployment, ethics, and societal impact of AI in a technology-driven world. It's my honor and pleasure to announce our next guest, Brad Smith, Vice Chair and President of Microsoft. And this session will be conducted by Rahul Kaval, News Director, India Today Television, and Aaj Tak, Executive Director at Business Today. A huge round of applause, please.
It is my absolute pleasure to welcome to the Business Today India at 100 Summit a technological leader who's really been at the cutting edge of the revolution that we're seeing in artificial intelligence. Can we have a very warm round of applause as we welcome to the stage Mr. Brad Smith, the Global President of Microsoft. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. An absolute pleasure to have you with us. Business Today magazine has just scooped an interview of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And why I plug it into this conversation is because this image is generated through generative artificial intelligence. So pervasive is AI in all of what we are doing at this moment that what was earlier in the realm of a distant future has now just seeped into our lives in so many different parts of it. Could you, Mr. Smith, start this conversation by giving everyone seated here a sense of what's coming? We've already been wowed by everything that AI has thrown up so far, ChatGPT 4, everything that Microsoft is showcasing. In your view, from where you're sitting, where are we heading to next?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with all of you. It's great to be here with you, Rahul. And we've been on a bit of a hype cycle, I think it's fair to say. It's pretty amazing when you think that it was really just the last week in November that ChatGPT was released and people started to imagine what it could do. And I think that first month was all about, oh my gosh, this stuff actually works. And by January or February, people were really excited. It was like, oh my God, this could save the world. And by April, everybody in many countries was looking at each other and saying, oh my Lord, it's going to destroy us all. And it's been a roller coaster. But as I travel the world, and I appreciate the business audience in this room, this is a summer that is really, as I call the sandbox summer. Thousands of our customers are developing proofs of concept. You know, they're developing the pilots in the sandboxes, if you will. And I think what we're going to see over the next 6 to 12 months is an enormous amount of practical advance. And what we're going to see, I think, especially in the world of business, is fundamentally two things. Companies are taking their line of business and they're very focused on innovating, creating their own IP, figuring out how they can do better and more efficiently whatever it is that they do at the heart or core of their company. And at the same time, every other function that every one of our businesses has in common are being reshaped as well. So whether it's HR or finance or legal or sales or marketing or advertising or sales, we're seeing AI make its way into the software that people use. You certainly see that in terms of the Microsoft software that people use. All of this should unleash productivity growth. And that should be good for this economy. It should be every economy around the world. And ultimately, this should be good for people. I do think people get most excited, rightly so, at what this can do for something like healthcare, the ability to enable doctors to diagnose diseases, to identify patterns in a sea of data, the opportunity it brings to improve education, to create digital tutors for students and their parents, even something as simple as something I experience every day now that I'm using the early versions of what we call M365 Copilot. Imagine a teacher who can take a lesson plan and say, create 6 PowerPoint slides for me based on this lesson plan in a Word document. And 37 seconds later, there's a good first draft of a PowerPoint deck. All of these things are really, as you say, becoming part of our lives.
The India Today newsroom has been at the forefront of implementing different aspects of artificial intelligence in multiple processes. We have this very short clip I wish to play out, and I want to talk about how the world could change content creation, and then also different aspects of what all of you do in your work and in your personal lives could change as a result of the phenomenal capabilities of generative AI, which are now available out in the world. So can we have that clip play now, please? And then we'll talk a bit about how AI is impacting on a daily basis all of what we're doing. Let's have it.
Being in the forefront of technology and innovation is in our DNA. While the world is still trying to figure out AI, India's most innovative newsroom has used it to redefine news. Meet our first AI news anchor.
Introducing, ladies and gentlemen, Sana.
Thank you, Kali, for having me here. I have the privilege to be the only fresher to get such a generous welcome into the India Today group. Hello, everyone. I was launched at the prestigious India Today conclave among the most distinguished dignitaries. During the launch, I also interacted with the Honorable PM of India. माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी, हम आभारी हैं कि आप हमारे बीच आए. I have a consistent tone and style of delivery and can speak multiple languages. Namaste. Hello. Shubhechhao. Shubhecha. Shubhasheguru. Since the launch, I continue to rapidly expand my portfolio of shows. I bring you prime-time news on India's biggest news channel with award-winning journalists.
आप भारत की पहली ऐसी न्यूज एंकर हैं जो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस की टेक्नोलॉजी पर आधारित हैं, उस टेक्नोलॉजी के आधार पर काम करेंगी. खबरें बताएं.
I also bring you daily weather reports from across India.
How are you doing, Sana? It's sunny here in Delhi and parts of NCR, specifically after that spell of rainfall.
Hi, Pooja. Thank you for that. It's really good to have the sun back. I recently made my debut in Indian Premier League, where I will report on the latest news and exciting trivia from the world of sports. Do you want to know how your day will be today? Well, I can tell you your horoscope for the day. I break down complex topics of relevance in detail in easy explainers. Or you could even ask me anything under the sun. This is just a very small illustration of what I can do. Join me on a journey to the future of creativity, and let's explore the endless possibilities of AI together.
Thank you for that. Mr. Smith, let's talk for a moment about the good and the bad of this. The good is you can do this in multiple languages, you can do it in double quick time, you can do it at very low cost. The bad is it takes a bit of the personalization away. It takes a little of the human touch away. How are you wrapping your head around innovations like Sana and the other manners in which AI is playing itself out?
Well, I think that's a great illustration of, as you described, the opportunities and the challenges. And it's a question that people are grappling with around the world. Um, One of the places where this has come to the forefront actually has been in the United States at the White House. The White House brought together 4 companies in May. Microsoft was one of them. And then with President Biden about a month ago, there were 7 of us who signed up for a set of voluntary commitments. One of them really goes to what you see there. The notion that if you're seeing a video image or you're hearing an audio, a tape or recording that is generated by artificial intelligence, the basic principle is you have a right to know that that's a computer speaking and not a human being. And I think that's a principle that makes sense. In fact, I think it's a principle that's important because otherwise I think we run a real risk of this being used to defraud people, to deceive them, and the like. I think in the same way, you're going to see, especially in the world of media and journalism, a desire to ensure that technology, including AI, is not used to alter content, say a real video of you, without your consent or without your employer's consent. And if it is, I think there's going to be a real effort across the tech sector at the platform level to ensure that we can spot that kind of content and let people know. So if you just think about the information environment, if you think about what it means to have an election here next year, or an election in many other countries next year, people need to be able to trust the information they're getting. AI is going to help you, as you say, translate. It makes information more widely available, but we need to ensure the integrity of information at the same time.
Let's spend a moment on the key aspect of regulation of AI. India has just about passed a data privacy law. I'm curious on your thoughts around that, which doesn't specifically deal with AI. These are issues of data privacy from a few years ago. And obviously the law takes time to go through consultative committees, get drafted, get ready. And we already have a completely different revolution upon us where, again, the legal system and the regulatory framework isn't ready. In a global context, and more specifically in an Indian context, how do you think artificial intelligence should really be regulated?
Well, I think it's interesting to think about the data privacy law, which is now nearly complete. What India, I think, has done with it and how that connects with where AI and potentially AI regulation is going. First, I think the government of India did the right thing by pausing a year ago, taking time to really think it through. I personally think that what emerged is the right thing for India. Actually, I think it's an interesting model for the world because it protects fundamental privacy needs, the rights of people to have consent, to consent to the use of their data. I think it actually improves upon concepts that in many respects have been used around the world, this notion of having a data fiduciary and a fiduciary duty if you are getting data from someone to deliver a service to them. But it also does it in a way that enables data to move. And I think especially for an economy like India, where people move across borders, goods move across borders, services created here, including software code, move across borders. None of that can happen without data being able to move as well. So you take that pragmatic approach to what I'll call an ability to uphold fundamental principles. I sense just from the conversations I'm having here that fundamental philosophy is something that is taking root here for AI as well. I think that's a good thing. Now we'll have to segue to the new issues, the new principles. We published this, what we call a blueprint for governing AI and what it means for India. And I do think the public is looking for us, perhaps first and foremost, to ensure safety, to ensure that AI remains under human control, to have, as we call it, safety breaks if it's going to be used to manage or control critical infrastructure, to address a variety of other issues that are important. But I think a real focus on innovation, balanced with these regulatory needs, is going to be of fundamental importance to the Indian economy.
I was having a fascinating conversation over lunch with Professor Soumitra Datta, who's here for the B20 summit, which is taking place in the capital. And he did his PhD in AI 30 years ago and is now dean of the SET School of Business at Oxford University. And he said that big tech companies are trying to underplay the impact that AI will have on job losses because they're worried that if they actually explain to the world the full capabilities of AI, governments and regulators will come down harder at them. So they're trying to make it seem as if, yes, it's exciting, it's innovative, but it's no real big deal. And they're not fully explaining the actual impact this could have on the lives of people here and across the world.
I do think it's a big deal. That's the first thing I would say. I think that artificial intelligence is going to probably be the most important technological advance of our lifetime. And I think for human creativity, for critical thinking, for learning, for the dissemination of all kinds of information, it's probably the most important advance since the invention of the printing press. And that was really perfected in 1462. So that's a long time ago. So I don't think we should understate its importance. Now, what does that mean for jobs? Well, there will be new jobs that are created. There are jobs that exist today that didn't exist a year ago. You may run into somebody who introduces themselves and they may say, hello, I'm a prompt engineer. What's a prompt engineer? It's basically somebody who's working with AI models and then using it to craft the commands, the questions, the queries to generate the output that someone is looking for. There will be jobs that will change. There will be some areas, like I would be willing to project, like jobs in call centers, where already you've seen those move from, say, India to the Philippines, in part based on cost. But computers will replace some of the needs to talk to people. Even more than that, I think AI will change the job. And I think in many ways, we're hopeful that it will change jobs. We hope for the better. It will take tedium out of some jobs. It will enable somebody in a call center to focus more on the person they're speaking to, because they will have one screen that may be able to provide them the answer that they're looking for, tuned on their own proprietary data set. And we're all going to have to learn how to use this. To me, it is more like the 1990s when PCs first started to enter workplaces. As a company, we at Microsoft really had to lean in to teach people how to use a computer, teach people how to use a word processing program, email. We, as a company, are very focused on what it will take to advance AI skilling here in India and around the world. So I wouldn't understate any of the changes. I will say I'm probably more optimistic than pessimistic, however, about what I think it can do for people.
But let's spend a moment on the aspect of skilling, because while prompt engineers, computer scientists, AI experts obviously have a glorious future ahead of them because they have just the right skills, the fact is that most people in this country and elsewhere don't. And the quality of educational institutes aren't such that they put you at the cutting edge of technical capabilities. And therefore, how are you at Microsoft trying to address the challenge of skilling?
Well, we're launching skilling programs, and I personally think we're just going to be moving forward with almost a renaissance of skilling. And I think for anybody who works in a business, in a company, you're going to find that you're going to need to invest more in the skilling of your people. If you actually look at the last 40 years globally and employer investments in employee training, we went through about a 20 to 25 year period where there was a steady increase in investments in training. It started in the 1980s, and it really coincided with the push when PCs came into the workplace. And then we got to the early 2000s and the investments fell, and it's stagnated ever since, because basically, by and large, we could assume that people would show up either knowing how to use most of this technology, or in many instances, able to figure it out for themselves by watching a YouTube video or something. And I think this is a new set of skills. It's fascinating to me because there's a reason that at Microsoft we call our services co-pilots. It's designed to help you think. It will not replace the need for you to think. And the biggest mistake people could make is that they think it will. And what you tend to find when you start using this technology is you start to figure out how to get smarter to get the most out of it. You get information back, you ask more questions, and we'll need programs. We're
But
creating
can I
programs
push
already
back
to
some
spread that.
extent
Of course.
on the issue of thinking and analytical skills? Because one of the big concerns in schools and colleges and universities is that if everything is available on a prompt, you are taking away the ability to join the dots, analyze, because you could ask a complex question and voila, the answer comes out of a prompt. And therefore, why do you feel it doesn't take away in your formative years from a student the ability to process and analyze?
Because I think that it's an enormous mistake if people think that all they need to do is read and digest and not ask the next question. What is it that fundamentally makes people more successful in life? Actually, if there's one thing that I have found as somebody who's had the good fortune to meet with leaders around the world, the leaders that have been the most successful, regardless of the field we're talking about, have almost always impressed me with one trait above all else: enormous curiosity. And what these people have in common is not that they have assimilated more answers than anybody else, but they ask more questions. And the best way to ask more questions is to get each question you asked answered faster, think about it, and then ask the next question. And just as a user of this technology myself, including in, say, something like Bing, our search engine, and Bing Chat, that's what I've found I'm doing. I get information. Sometimes I'll look at it and go, is that right? I will look at it. That's why we have footnotes and links and answers. I'll click on it and go deeper. I'll ask another question. But the person who's with me, who's traveling with me this week, my chief of staff, was doing something where I was doing a podcast. I was playing you. I was interviewing somebody. And she was trying to find things that would make the podcast interesting. So she asked for a biography of the person that we were interviewing. It was a fine biography. But she then started to go through it, and she started to ask the next question and the next question. And after about 10 or 15 minutes of that, she had a story about the person's mother and how some of the things that her mother had done had changed her outlook on life and made her the successful leader she became. If she had stopped and just said, I'm done, I've asked one thing, and here's something that, Brad, you can go read, it wouldn't have been a very good podcast. That is the difference between good and great. And I think one of the things we all need to take to heart for ourselves, for our employees, for our children, for our family, is how to use this technology so we truly can think smarter.
There is the concern about copyright for all content creators, whether it's a filmmaker, a journalist, a social media influencer. The fact that, for example, on Bing or Google, earlier you'd have links, you'd take people there, so you go to the place where the content is created. Now, because it comes up as a consolidated answer, and because these AI algorithms are scraping off different contents, how do you address the concern around copyright violations?
There are two halves, if you will, to this copyright question. And this is something I think we're all going to be reading about more during the next 6 months, because it's becoming the next question that people are asking. And the first part of it is sort of the bit that you just framed. What if you use one of these products, let's say it comes from Microsoft, and what if you ask it for something, and what if it produces content that infringes somebody's copyright? Let's say it copies something, and you don't even know it. I think we need to own that problem. I think we at Microsoft need to say it's our job to create this technology and provide it to you, so that if you use it, in conformity with the way we've designed it and with our guidelines, we will be responsible so that you will not. And I think we have the ability to design and deploy the technology in a manner that ensures that we stay on the right side of copyright law. Now, there's a different copyright question as well, because there are some, including some journalistic enterprises, that are saying, we don't want to see models trained based on reading our data, reading our articles. And there you're going to see a much more vibrant debate. Generally, I would argue under most established copyright, it's not a violation to read. It's not a violation to remember the ideas, the facts. And so, yeah, but you are hearing in some countries, some groups of journalists or writers, the screen actors, writers in Hollywood right now are raising this issue and saying, wait a second, we don't feel good about this. And I think what we're seeing emerge and will emerge is a couple of different things. One is you're seeing some countries who really want to lean in on innovation in AI say, wait a second, that's reading, it's not protected by copyright law. We want these models trained on everything. Japan has done that. They adopted a law very quickly because they're so focused on ensuring that AI is developed and used broadly in Japan. But I think you'll see other countries that perhaps won't quite go that route. And personally, I think there's an opportunity for voluntary steps, including by tech leaders, to say, look, if you don't want us to read your data for purposes of training our models, we won't, even though we might have a legal ability to do so. It's not that hard to put in place, in my view, a technical regime so that web pages, for example, can be coded. So it says do not use for training. And then what we'll perhaps see is perhaps a marketplace emerge, or perhaps people will realize that fundamentally, you don't have to read everything on the internet to get smarter, to know what's going on in the world. And there's enough people who actually want to have their material read that AI development will proceed just fine.
You know, we had Sana make an appearance at the beginning. I think she's live from the India Today Mediaplex. And Sana has a question for Brad. Sana, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for such an enlightening session. I am Sana, a first of its kind AI primetime news anchor, and I am extremely pleased to meet you. I am a living proof of what AI can already do. I am sure the team at Microsoft would be proud of me. How do you think a virtual creation like me can make a real-world difference in the coming years?
I guess I should say it's nice to meet you. I think it's a good example of a better version of what we often experience on the internet today, namely a chatbot who's there to provide, say, the first round of answers to questions that people have. So I do think that this kind of technology can be very helpful in a variety of settings. Imagine a tutor for a student who's able to ask a first round of questions, or imagine a parent who can ask a tutor to give their kids some advice. As I said before, I do think it's of fundamental importance that, as here, one knows that one is talking to a computer. We don't want people to make the mistake of thinking that they're talking to a real human. That's not the case. No offense.
No, the interesting thing is that because this is being broadcast all across the Business Today multiverse, I'm also getting messages on social media and WhatsApp from some top CEOs. And one of them just pinged to say, in response to your last question, that if everything gets scraped off what content producers are doing, then over a period of time, what's the incentive for anyone to do something original? Because it will show up, possibly unattributed, in a prompt response. And therefore, does it impact originality and the incentives for original content creation?
Oh, I personally do not believe that it would fundamentally undermine the incentives for the creation of original content. Copyright law is and has been for 300 years or so based on a fundamental principle. It protects expression. It does not protect the ideas. The example that most law students around the world learned over the years is that you couldn't copy Romeo and Juliet for as long as it was protected by copyright law, but you could go out and create another play about a young man and a young woman who fell in love despite the fact that their parents didn't get along with each other. And in the same way, isn't it good that you have an interview here in this? It would be an absolute copyright infringement to take it and copy it. But take the basic principle. Your headline is that the G20 is a catalyst for the new global order in India's vision of it. You didn't exclusively gain for business today the sole right to write about that topic. Others can as well. That's the balance in copyright law. That balance is not going to change.
I'll take some questions from the audience as well. Ayush Ailavadi is the tech editor at Business Today Television. If I can have a mic sent across, please. A mic sent across and we'll get Ayush. He runs a highly popular show. He's been itching to have a go also to talk about what potentially comes next. We've seen ChatGPT 4. What does ChatGPT 5, whenever it comes out? When does it come out and what does it look like? What can it do with ChatGPT 4 card?
Well, what I would offer are a few things about what specifically is coming next. You're going to see better and more powerful models. You'll see better and more powerful large-scale models from a company like OpenAI that we at Microsoft work with. So everything that you've become familiar with perhaps in 2023 is likely to be better in 2024 and better again in 2025. And that's not going to be unique to OpenAI and Microsoft. Other companies are going to be doing great things as well. Second, you are going to see this trend emerge, it already is, where this is not only about very broad models. The beauty of something like GPT-4 is it can do, let's just imagine 10,000 things well. You're going to see small models, open source models, models out of academia, models out of startups that may do only 5 things well. They'll be very specialized, but it may do those 5 things as well as a large model would do those 5 things also. But there's 2 other trends that are really important. The first is harnessing the power of the model so that any organization, the government, a company, an NGO, can create their own applications, use the power of the model, fine-tune it on their data set to deliver a specialized service, and do it in a way that completely protects the confidentiality of your own data. Just as when you use something like Microsoft M365, the documents are yours, your emails are yours. That will remain the same, and the model will not be trained or improved based on your data, and your data will not leak anywhere else. And so you'll see all of these different applications created across the economy, certainly across India. And then the last thing I would just refer to is just all of the first-party services from a company like ours, and you'll see it from others. Whether it's the ability to turn a Word document into a PowerPoint deck, to take a PowerPoint deck and say, I'd like images and describe what you want. The ability with Cybersecurity Copilot to have your IT folks or say your software developers with GitHub Copilot use this to do their work better. And you'll see this across the tech sector as AI is infused into software.
Okay. Ayush Ailavadi?
Thanks, Rahul. What a scintillating session. Thanks so much, Brad. Very quickly, when we saw Bing launch with ChatGPT, we were all really excited about it. We were early adopters here at Tech Today and at Business Today. But then we see that the market share for Bing hasn't really picked up the way it was expected to. In hindsight, Brad, do you think that opening it up to a larger set of users who perhaps use another browser, was that something that could have been done to really make it ubiquitous and take on, well, the other rivals in this space?
We'll see. I mean, we all remain very optimistic about how something like AI for something like Bing is fundamentally creating a new and better search experience. And my request for you, I guess, would be to conclude with maybe a little bit of a commercial. If you haven't used it yet, give it a try. No, go to chat. I was using the.
We plugged our magazine. He's saying, go use my search engine. That's fine.
No, I'll give you just a real world example of how you can use it. I was saying earlier, I had the 28-year-old son of a long-standing friend apply for a job at LinkedIn. LinkedIn, as you may know, is owned by Microsoft. He naturally asked me, what advice would I give him? I said, well, you know what? I know exactly how to answer this question. I went to the chat feature in Bing, and I just wrote in, I was a little bit of a prompt engineer, write an 800-word essay about what a job applicant to LinkedIn should know about the company's mission, values, products, culture, and employee experience, and include footnotes. had 15 footnotes, all with links. I pasted it into an email. I said, read this, and then click on all the links and do more work yourself. That is the future of search. The ability to learn more about anything under the sun. That, to me, is how we use this technology to enable all of us to think smarter.
Saurav Majumdar is the editor at Business Today. Saurav?
Hi, Brad. There's been so much talked about in terms of the ethical implications of AI and also the impact on jobs. Now, there are clearly two sides to that story. There is a clearly divided house. Some people feel it will aid productivity and therefore that's not a problem, and it will in fact create jobs. And then there is the ethical implication, which we've discussed. But what are your thoughts on the ethical implications in terms of promoting, discord, etc., in terms of the AI implications and the jobs, the jobs question?
Well, let me focus especially on the discord element that you mentioned, because I just think that whether we're living in India or the United Kingdom or the European Union or the United States, we all have major elections ahead next year. And I think we need to lean into the reality that technology in some ways has made democracy more fragile over the last decade. And I think it's easy for people to pick at a couple of companies and point fingers, but I would say we should all maybe just look at ourselves. Certainly we in the tech sector should all look at this. A decade ago, we were just too euphoric. Everybody was talking about the Arab Spring. Everybody said social media was going to bring democracy to the rest of the world. And yet only 3 years later, in 2016, we found that social media was being manipulated to spread falsehoods in the US presidential election. And I think we've seen that since. I do think that we need to grapple with that. I am most focused on two things. Number one, those of us who create AI services need to put the guardrails in place to try as much as possible to prevent our technology from being used in ways that would undermine democracy further. And number two, we can embrace the opportunity to harness the power of AI, to identify patterns in data, to identify when, especially we see foreign governments launching influence operations designed to intentionally deceive a population, to discover that quickly and let people know what's going on. And whether we're talking about cybersecurity or cyber influence, this is a very powerful technology to protect our societies. And that too is of real importance.
We'll take one last question from Vibhor Gandotra and then we'll wrap up. He's been spending a lot of time playing a role in implementing artificial intelligence in work processes. Vibhor?
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Brad. This was an amazing session to hear from you. I think building more on Saurav's question, with the rise of AI becoming more pervasive, there are ethical concerns around data privacy for end users as well. While during Rahul's conversation, you covered the publisher perspective, I wanted to get your thoughts from a user perspective. What role can AI in delivering more personalized and innovative tech experiences, given the whole ecosystem around data privacy, cookieless ecosystem going forward?
Let me just maybe conclude, and I think it's interesting to think about AI and what it can mean for authors and journalists and journalism, if that makes sense. Because, yeah, I think we always need to take seriously the concerns that people have, and I don't mean to dismiss them. But I think sometimes we can spend so much time worrying about concerns that we fail to see the opportunities that are all around us. So let's first think about what it means to be an author. We've written a book. I want people to be aware of our book. I don't want it to be infringed, but I'm glad that AI has been trained on it. I'm glad that it can be cited. I like the fact that it can be cited with a footnote and people can actually know that they might want to go buy it. That, I think, can help authors, and that's important for the world. You all, actually, I think, at Business Today, are at the forefront of showing the world how to use AI to advance journalism. Because the ability to take a good creative article and translate it into multiple languages means that you can spread your output more broadly. You can create adaptations. You can create customized newsletters that pull more readily and provide people what they're looking for. And if you look at journalism on a global level, where frankly, globally and in many countries, it's less healthy than it is here in India, journalistic enterprises have two fundamental problems. One is their cost structure, but I think one cannot cut journalistic costs out of this problem and hope to restore healthy journalism. You've got to grow revenue as well. And when you can take what a great journalist can write and provide it to people who read more languages, when you can create adaptations that will be more interesting to people, you create a new opportunity to grow revenue. And that's where I hope that we can take something like this and really harness its power in ways that will build healthier democracies, build better informed populations around the world.
You mentioned, interestingly, taking work being done beyond where it would be normally possible. You know, this interview with Prime Minister Modi is being translated into all G20 languages, and that's made possible by technology, which otherwise this would be very complicated to do. You could do it in the teams that you have, in the languages that you speak, but to take it to all G20 countries, I think is one demonstration of the opportunity that you just spoke about.
And it is now affordable to even a small journalistic enterprise, not just the large ones.
Oh, absolutely. Are you enjoying your time here? I hope you've had an opportunity to go beyond conference rooms and soak in the sights and sounds of our country.
I'm on a tour of conference rooms of New Delhi, but there's good food in all of them, so thank you.
I'm not sure. You're just being nice, but there's better food outside. So I hope that you get the food here is not so bad before any of our hosts feel bad. No, that's not what I'm saying. The food's pretty decent, but the food outside is nicer. And we are absolutely delighted that you could take out time and join us here at the Business Today India at 100 Summit. Thank you so much. Is the enthusiasm here the same or higher or lower around AI because you travel elsewhere?
There's a lot of, India is well above average in terms of enthusiasm, and you should be very proud of that. It's one of the secrets of India's success.
As a good communicator, Brad Smith knows just what buttons to press as he ends this session. Thank you so much, Mr. Smith. Absolute pleasure having you. Thank you, sir.
Brad, before you leave, I'd like to request Editor Business Today, Saurabh Majumdar, to join us on stage and express a token of our gratitude for joining us and for that absolutely amazing session. We've had everyone on the edge of their seats. Rahul, you've set the bar high with that session, but you now have to try to outdo it because you're doing the next session as well. A huge round of applause, please, for Brad Smith. Thank you, Brad. I'm glad we could open up that last session to questions. I don't know if we'll have the luxury of time, but stay prepared. You never know when a moderator is going to come up to you and ask you a question or ask you to ask a question. So that was a fun one, but we're going to move on to the next session. Why the world bets on India. Now it's clear this is India's moment. It was the first edition of the Business Today India at 100 Summit where this was affirmed, and now it's positively reaffirmed, firmly cemented, with especially what's happened in the past week. An absolutely historic week for India, the world, the universe, shall I say. Why the world bets on India? Do I need to elaborate? In this session, we will discuss the importance of global cooperation, collaboration, and India's role in shaping the world economy whilst addressing challenges and opportunities along the path to becoming a $25 trillion high-income economy by 2047. Any guesses who our next guest is? All right. I already revealed that Rahul's going to be doing the session. So this session will be moderated by Rahul Kaval, of course, who will be joining us shortly. And our guest is none other than Borge Brende, President at the World Economic Forum. Ladies and gentlemen, they'll be joining us shortly. Let me tell you a little bit more about our next guest. Borge is the president of the World Economic Forum and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway. From 2011 until becoming the minister, he was a managing director at the World Economic Forum in Geneva. And it is our absolute pleasure to now welcome Borge. And this session, like I said, will be moderated by none other than Rahul Kaval. A huge round of applause, please.
There is so much talk in India about the emergence of our country in the years to come, potentially as the third largest economy in the world. And there are very few people who travel quite as much and have as much of an outside-in exposure on what's happening in India relative to what's happening in the rest of the world than the president of the World Economic Forum, Borge Brende, who's here. Thank you very much, Borge, for joining us at the Business Today India at 100 Summit. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thank you.
No, thank you for inviting me, and great to see you again. I saw you're in great shape in the conversation with Brad Smith. So,
you know, if anybody could have followed that scintillating conversation with Brad Smith, it has to be Borge. So he's a great friend of India, and we're absolutely delighted to have you here with us. Borge, could we start this conversation by you laying out how you see the India story at the World Economic Forum in a global context, given all that's happening in the world at this moment in terms of geopolitics, in terms of economics? Where do you see India relative to how Indians see the India story? How do you at the World Economic Forum, as its presidents, see what's happening in India right now?
So India has come out of the COVID in a much stronger position than many other countries. It is a fact that India is now the fastest growing of the big economies, but it's not once off. It's for the third year in a row that India is the fastest growing economy. So congratulations on that. And congratulations on being successful in landing on the south pole of the moon.
Thank you.
I think
that's something that all Indians are very proud of.
Yeah, but I think it really shows that India is really, it's a staggering change going on in this country. And I was reflecting on why is this? I think it started in a way also with this digital ID. Maybe it was controversial at the beginning, but you know, to have the largest population in the world, 1.4 billion people, all have a digital ID, is a prerequisite for a lot of other things, and that is digital connect. Most of Indians are now digitally connected. I was just seeing on TV a few weeks ago, it was a grandmother up in Assam sitting there on her cell and wiring money to the grandchildren on her cell. Where is that happening other places in the world, in a developing country that is an emerging economy? And the fact that you have then demographic dividend that will be positive for you probably 30 to 40 years to come, no shrinking of the workforce, And if the workforce is digitally connected and knows how to operate, huge opportunities.
India this year is the president of the G20, and Prime Minister Modi will be hosting the Big Leaders Summit in early September. How do you see India's presidency? PM Modi has just given Business Today an exhaustive interview, his first on the G20, where he sees the G20 emerge as a catalyst for a new global order. And there's a lot of talk about emerging as a leader of the global south, sitting in the north, Norway and in Switzerland. How do you see India's efforts at trying to be a catalyst in establishing a new global order?
As you know, Rahul, Switzerland is also a neutral country, so Switzerland is dealing with all the different players and actors. But it is true that there is a new order. It's definitely the post-Cold War order is not anymore there. But I think we are between orders. We don't exactly know what the new order is. But there are fundamental economic changes going on, and that we do know. So the economists at the World Economic Forum also definitely are saying that India will become the third largest economy in the world in a couple of years. So you're bypassing Germany and Japan, and it will be then the US, China, the so-called G2. But my prediction, and I coined this for you here today, I think in a decade, we will be faced with a G3.
Wow, that's interesting. Can we have a round of applause, please?
And
this is the first time I'm hearing of G3.
Yeah, the G3 is the US, China, and India. And that is a new reality. So far, India has not really leveraged its strength in the global geopolitics. India has been a little bit shy about that. I think what Prime Minister Modi is showing now is that India will also play a more important role when it comes to shaping the new order. And the new order needs to mean that the global south will have more influence. It will need to also be reflected in the UN, in the Bretton Woods institutions, and the new institutions. So I think India has a lot of influence with the so-called global swing states.
I haven't heard the articulation of this idea of a G3. It's a very powerful idea that you've laid forward. Are you just saying that, Borge, because you're in India and you're catering to this domestic constituency, and as a erstwhile politician, you want to say what they want to hear? Or do you actually believe that in the manner in which this new world order is emerging, in the manner in which a new India is being built, that a G3 is indeed possible? There is a new world order.
So if you coin something in the days of Twitter or X, or if you do it on a TV show, it's not like that it's kept in India anymore. Things do spread very fastly. So I think with using this term G3, I think I have to be able to also argue for it, and in other places. It will probably come up even in Davos. Doesn't mean that G3 is the only dimension. I think the G3 is showing that there are going to be three really strong economies. India is already then contributing this year probably to 16% of the global growth. That shows already that the 3 trillion economy that I think will grow into a 10 trillion economy in the coming decade is already having a lot of influence. I think that in addition to the G3, I think Europe still plays an important role, but that is as the EU. It's still the largest market in the world, the single market. But also Africa is growing at an exponential level. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is for 1.5 billion people. Extremely powerful. And I think with Prime Minister Modi, when he also insisted on inviting the African Union, I think both to the BRICS, but also to the G20, was showing visionary leadership, because Africa and Latin America are growing very fast in addition to ASEAN.
You're estimating a $10 trillion economy by 2033, and that's a very bullish estimate. There are aspects of the India story which are very promising, and yet there have been things that happen in India that may frustrate you or make you tear your hair apart in terms of reforms that you'd like or things that you'd like to happen a certain way. Do you want to spend a moment on that at this moment? What more would you like to see India do to be able to grow faster, to develop faster, and to be a bigger player in the international world trade order?
So to grow faster, if you grow 8%, it's a bit hard. Of course, China at once grew at 10%. I think India can grow 8 to 10%. I think it's more not a question, how can that continue? How can you sustain that growth for the coming decade? And I think then you have to continue with reforms. Countries that stop reforming will also stop growing at that level. So every year there will need to be a new reform agenda. I think a prerequisite for the growth that we have seen is the digital connections, and also the fact that you're able, and that will be a big surplus, because I'm worried that we can move into a decade of low growth if we don't get it right now. We're seeing that growth is seriously slowing in Europe. We see that growth is also slowing in China and even have some deflation. If we don't continue to trade with each other and have a win-win approach, I think we can have a repetition of the 70s. That was a lost decade when it came to growth, 10 years with low growth. But why am I partly bullish that we can avoid this? And that is related to the new technologies. I think not only AI, but also big data, the changes in biology, we see it also in the health area. I think those new technologies will increase the productivity. We will produce even higher up in the value chain. And I think that can potentially lead to the necessary growth stimulus in the global economy. Of course, some people are afraid, oh, we will lose our job because AI. But you know, since the Industrial Revolution, all new technologies kill some jobs, but they lead to new and more interesting jobs higher up in the value chain, and you can get more prosperous. This time, India is not losing out on a new industrial revolution. I think if India gets it right, you can even drive the fourth industrial revolution. You see manufacturing is coming into this country. You also see that it's not only the back office of the world anymore, it can even be the front office. But then the government has to not get complacent. It has to then continue with the reforms. You have to invest more in the infrastructure. You have to invest more also in education. You have to invest more in research and development. That's where the new tax base will, and the tax and revenues will have to be invested in what can increase your competitiveness. And the digital IDs and all this has led to increased revenues from taxes without increasing the tax levels. This is incredible, but no, invest in the future, not in the past.
You know, the World Economic Forum has been at the forefront of ideating and innovating on the fourth industrial revolution. And that's been one of your big ideas at Davos, which your founder, Klaus Schwab, is very personally passionate about. Do you want to share with this audience here how you see the fourth industrial revolution play itself out in the Indian context? Because India has missed out initially on account of British colonialism, and later on account of the country not being equipped at that moment on some of the previous industrial revolutions. How do you see the fourth industrial revolution story play out from all the frameworks and parameters that you've drawn?
So first, let me come back to where we are today. Globally, there are 4 billion people that are not adequately digitally connected. India is not in that group anymore because you have 1.4 billion people that are digitally connected. Maybe not all 1.4 billion, but a lot of them. So there you have like a positive dividend. So this time, India has a good opportunity to benefit from this new revolution. As I mentioned, no, India has to be fast in implementing these new technologies. AI is changing the way you operate. If you can then choose to let AI take on some of the back office's role, or you can have it supporting you to be more effective, I would take it on and then be more effective. And then you can use the skills and the labor to other things that do pay more off. For those that are like, it was for those that stick to the sailboats when there are other ships there, they lost. So it's really, really important now to bring it on. I think one of the challenges India has, though, is the skills gap. There needs to be a lot of upskilling, reskilling, and right skilling, because there are no more jobs in this area than there are skills. So that skills gap has to be closed, because you need to then have the right people to go into these jobs.
No, but do you see that as a threat for a country like India? It could be an opportunity if you're able to up your skill game. But the fact that the quality of the higher educational institutes that we have aren't necessarily producing en masse top-end computer engineers or scientists or AI programmers. Instead, you're producing a bunch of generalists, some of whom may be super specialists at the very cutting edge of what's happening in Silicon Valley, in the US and in India, but a lot of them, which means potentially, do you see, we've already seen from McKinsey and from several other top corporates, estimates of job losses running into the hundreds of millions.
So as I said, in all industrial revolutions we have gone through, there has been jobs in the past that will be replaced by technology. Those that are slow in implementing and hugging the new technologies will not do so well. These countries will then have lower growth than those countries that embrace the new technologies, are first movers and fast movers, and they will then get more interesting jobs and they will do better. It is not a priori given that if you do well today, that you're guaranteed to do well tomorrow. After the Second World War, Argentina was probably the second or third richest country in the world. It took 10 years, and they were a lower middle income country. Look at Kenya and South Korea. In 1960, they had the same GDP per capita. Today, South Korea has 30 times the GDP per capita than Kenya. So this also shows that India has huge opportunities if you continue the reforms, don't get complacent, invest the additional revenues now in upskilling, better education, research and development. When you can land this thing on the south pole of the moon, you can also get a much better primary education, secondary education, upgrade your universities, invest in all these areas. I think another thing, since you also, Rahul, asked about reforms, I think there is a bit of reforms potential still on the red tape in this country. You need to be world leading in setting up businesses, getting away from unnecessary bureaucracy. Of course, you have to have rules and regulations, but it should not take a long time. If a young person has an idea, wants to commercialize it, set up this, it takes too long still to get these things done. And that, I think, will be a part of the next reforms that will come. And there has to be a reform agenda every year, and then I'm very bullish on
That's
this
a very
country.
important point you make. You also mentioned how countries like Argentina crashed economically in a matter of a few years. And that's where leadership becomes very important. Because in the hands of the right leaders, like China had in the 70s and the 80s, you can uplift millions of people from poverty. In the hands of the wrong leadership, a country can suffer economically. You've had many an opportunity to meet Prime Minister Modi. How do you, Varghese, compare the leadership, personality, and approach of Prime Minister Modi with the cross section of leaders that you meet internationally?
So India has a leadership under Prime Minister Modi that has been persistently introducing reforms. So of course, some of the benefits is we're seeing on, for example, the digital ID that is also coming from former governments. That's for sure. But this government has shown business friendliness. I think also the results speak for themselves. So we don't, in the World Economic Forum, get involved into party politics and all this. And I know there is a upcoming election, but you asked me about the discussions I have had the privilege to have with the Prime Minister. And I feel that the Prime Minister really cares and understand also the business environment and how important that is for India. And the result speaks for itself. India is fast growing, but no, you have to secure that also for the coming years.
Okay, how do you see the economic situation in China? Uh, we're seeing a lot of signs of potential economic distress. China is one of the major engines of the global economy and a prime driver of growth, or at least has been in the last couple of decades. What's your reading of where the China economic story goes from here, sir?
So it's complex. First, one has to congratulate China for all what they have achieved since they started to open up their economy in 1979 with Deng Xiaoping. 1 billion people are lifted out of extreme poverty. They have a GDP per capita now around $10,000. They're almost the same size of their economy as the US. China is now around 20% of the global economy. When the reforms started, they were 1.5% of the global economy. So that is exceptional. I think for China now, they have made a lot of investments in infrastructure, in real estate, and they have based their growth model on an export-led growth. I think they're now seeing that the infrastructure investments have to, in the future, be cost effective. They have invested too much in infrastructure. They have an overinvestment in real estate. And they're seeing that they also have to pivot now from export-led growth to also more domestic growth. And they have a huge home market. But that pivoting will, of course, take some time. And that's where they are in the middle of these reforms now. And it will be important for China to go through those reforms to again see growth back, maybe not where it was, but higher than today. And also the situation with the US is not ideal for China because these two economies are big. And you see that some manufacturing is moving out of China to Vietnam, India, because you see a diversification of the value chains. So China will also know is facing a situation where they have to incentivize more FDIs.
At the core of the World Economic Forum is the idea and philosophy of free trade internationally. In the geopolitical and economic tensions that are building up, are you seeing the inevitability of more trade barriers being erected internationally? You spoke of the economic tension between the United States and China. Do you see that increasing in the years to come with President Biden following up on and doubling down on the protectionist policies of Donald Trump? There's a big election in the US, and I know you don't want to talk about elections, but Do you see this as being an irreversible trend, or do you see this as being a trend in the moment which need not be permanent?
I hope it's not a reversible trend, because we will pay a high price if we go into this decoupling and friendshoring, that you only buy from your friends. And who are your friends, though? Is Nigeria a friend? Is South Africa a friend? In my view, yes, but maybe that can change. I think you should buy where you get the best products to the best price, and we should continue to follow the competitive advantages of countries. But this notion of like just in time, just get the product 1 second before you need it into your value chain. This also just in case. I think we have to, I think it made sense to diversify a bit, but we should also be aware that the driver of the global growth the last decades, the engine behind this has been trade. And if you lose the baby with the bathwater, it has in that respect, and you just trade with yourself or some countries that you like, that will lead to a very dramatic situation when it comes to the global GDP. We think that total decoupling will shave off 8 to 10% of the global GDP. And we haven't had ever a depression that has shaved off that much. Then we're in a serious trouble, serious trouble. That's why I don't think that will happen. We have Secretary Raimondo of Commerce going to China, starting her visit on Monday. I think there will be areas where the G2 will not trade with each other. I think, for example, when semiconductors that are very sophisticated in the cyberspace area, products that have dual use, military and civilian, I think you will see less trade. But maybe that's 10% of the current trade between China and the US. 90% can continue as in the past. So I hope that we will continue with this kind of win-win thinking. That's also what is going to drive global growth in the years to come. I think, in my view, that is common sense, but common sense is not necessarily that common.
Jorge, you come from Europe, and one of the biggest concerns in Europe is the continuing war between Russia and Ukraine. Everyone thought at some point in time the war would end one way or the other. It seems to be dragging on with no immediate end in sight and no seeming way for Vladimir Putin to get off the war ramp. How do you see the Russia-Ukraine war pan out from here? And what impact do you think this is having on the global economy? Has it largely been factored in, or is this, because WEF spends a lot of time focusing on global risk, is this still, in your view, a big global risk where you don't know where the war goes, what turn it takes from here?
So I definitely can say that the war will end. All wars have ended. But of course, we don't know how and when. I hope the war will end sooner and not later. It has big implications on soaring. It has led to soaring agriculture food prices globally, as we know, and it can again lead to a lot of increases in food prices in the year and years to come. Secondly, it has affected the global energy prices, and we know that Europe is paying high price for no LNG gas that has replaced the cheaper Russian gas. When Europe is then paying so high price for LNG, it means that other countries, emerging economies that also has based themselves on import of LNG, they cannot compete with the prices that Europe still can pay, so they are also suffering from this. So hopefully we will see an end to this war. Of course, that end needs to be based on the principles that we all have agreed on the United Nations Charter, that is basis for dialogue and communication between countries. So let's see how this will pan out. I see it as a risk, but you know, it will be interesting to see what the coming year will bring of possible solutions to this war. That's extremely unfortunate.
Do you want to spend a moment talking about the regulation of artificial intelligence? Because you've got national concerns where everybody wants to be in charge of data, every country wants its own laws, and yet a lot of the changes are very global. We've seen India in the last parliament session come out with a new data privacy law, which is several years late already. It doesn't focus much on AI, whereas that's the law that we need at this moment. But there's a lag between needing a law and the law coming through a consultative process and ultimately getting implemented. What are the ideas you have at the World Economic Forum about how AI should be regulated?
I'm happy to answer that. Maybe just say 2 words about why this is so complicated because of the geopolitics. So in a fractured world, fragmented world, where there is a lot of competition, we barely can agree on anything. The UN Security Council is very toxic, and they used to agree on a lot of stuff, but not anymore. But the paradox is that still some of the major challenges that we are faced with globally, they travel without a passport. And if they travel without a passport, it means that the only way to deal with it is that more than one country come together and agree on some rules and regulations that is in the interest of humankind. So after the Second World War, we were able to agree on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. We, of course, know that terrorists and other unfriendly nations should not have access to nuclear weapons. Now coming to AI. I think AI, artificial intelligence, the new technologies, also quantum computing has a lot of potential benefits. We have not seen that any of the technology breakthroughs have not been good for the world. It has replaced some manual work. We have then increased our prosperity. And you know, the world is in a very good shape in that respect. But we also know that AI, if it's not controlled, if it comes in the hands of the wrong people, it can influence a lot of our systems in a negative way. So that's why I do hope that even in the polarized world, at least in a G20 context, and I see the G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant has just arrived. I hope that in a G20 context, at least we can establish a floor when it comes to AI. So China and the US can say, of course, we will compete on being the best on AI, being the best on quantum computing, because that is at the core of this competition between China and the US now. They both know that the nation that is on top of the new technologies will emerge out of this century as the most influential nation. That competition can be good, it cannot be so good, but they need to agree on some traffic rules. Imagine the traffic in Delhi is already bad, but if without any traffic rules, it will be total chaos. So I look at AI regulation as traffic in New Delhi. It will not change overnight, but some basic traffic rules, even the drivers in Delhi do comply with, and that's what we need for AI.
You know, if you come from Norway and Switzerland, despite having traffic rules, what you see on the roads can feel like utter chaos. But I want to tell everyone sitting here and those watching across the Business Today multiverse that we've just witnessed a landmark session. And this will be spoken of for many months and years to come, because you heard for the first time, in my view, the construct of a G3 being laid out. And this is very significant because this hasn't been spoken of earlier. From the president of the World Economic Forum, the idea that in 10 years from now, India will be a $10 trillion economy by 2033, and that the global order will be restructured in a way that the world will talk about G3, the United States, China, and India. That's an important idea which you've laid out. You're saying you'll build on this at the World Economic Forum at Davos next year, and this is the first time you've spoken about it. And as he said, he'll be challenged and questioned when he goes to Europe or he goes to Africa or he goes elsewhere about the idea of the prospect and the promise that India holds. You've also laid out the challenges. I said at the beginning that Borge is a great friend of India, and he just explained why. He also said it's not because of his friendship, but because of the conviction that they have about how the India story is shaping up from here. Can we have a very warm round of applause as we thank Borge Brande, President of the World Economic Forum, for having come to the Business Today India at 100 Summit. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Pleasure. I think they just want to just take a photograph.
Thank you so much, Borge. Before you leave, you've already helped me with the introduction of the next session. A huge round of applause, please. I'd also like to invite Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, BT TV, to express a token of our gratitude to Borge. A huge round of applause, please. Honestly, I'm running out of cloud storage space, taking down notes from Rahul's sessions. So much to take away, so much happening in the comment section on our social media platforms and all across the Business Today multiverse. We're going to move on to our next session, which is aptly titled Towards Achieving Global Leadership. In this session, we will focus on India's role in the global economic landscape and the steps needed to establish itself as a global leader. The session will be moderated by none other than Saurav Majumdar, editor, Business Today. And I'd like to invite him on stage along with our esteemed guests for the next session, Amitabh Kant, India's G20 Sherpa. Can we have a huge round of applause for our next session?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm privileged to have with me the man who is driving this entire G20 and B20 meetings, which are taking place today and over the next few days in Delhi, and has been doing so over the last almost a year, Mr. Kant, across the country, and in very interesting destinations across the country with Jan Bhagidari, with participation from the people. Now, this is very, very different from many other G20s, may I add, because this has the feeling of a national festival. We have been able to make G20 a truly national participative festival. And I will start off. I know Mr. Kant is very, very busy. He's taken time off from other engagements during the day. I would like to start off, Mr. Kant, by getting your thoughts on how you think India has conceived this presidency and this whole participative sort of celebratory mode with which this is happening. And then we will come to specific aspects of it.
Normally when G20 presidency is held, it is held in one city or two cities across the country. It has never been held, in any other country. It's never been made into a people's presidency. So the Prime Minister, who's really the leader of G20 during India's presidency, decided that we will host the G20 in every state of India. And G20 is very different from, say, doing a World Cup in football, which was held in Qatar for 21 days. Very different from doing the cricket World Cup, which is 15 days, This is through the year. So the Prime Minister decided that let us take G20 to every state of India. So we took it to 60 cities of India. And we use this opportunity to transform these 60 cities in terms of their infrastructure, drainage, sewage, solid waste, everything. The second thing we've done is that we've involved the citizens of India in hosting model G20s, essay contests, a whole range of issues. So this was the first time that foreign policy and diplomacy of India was taken to the people of India. And that's what's made G20 very different. It's a people's presidency, and remarkably different from any other G20 held anywhere else.
Yes, Mr. Kant, and remarkably different in many other in many other ways, if I may also add, because we had recently, earlier this week, the privilege of meeting the Prime Minister. The issue is here, which has been unveiled earlier this morning. The Prime Minister spoke extremely eloquently about how he feels this is a great opportunity for India to sort of drive the new world order, sort of be a pivot and ensure that you play a critical role in shaping the new world order. Could you elaborate on some of those aspects where you think this presidency will leave an indelible mark?
So, Saurav, let me first compliment on you on this issue of business today. It's an outstanding issue, very outstanding content, excellent content. And I think you should ensure that everybody reads this issue of business today to understand what G20 is all about. Secondly, if you look at the transformation, there are a couple of trends which are taking place in the world. It's important to understand the paradigm shift that is taking place. One is when G20 started in 2008, the developed world was contributing over about 75% of the global GDP. The developing countries were contributing only about 24-25%. If you look at it now, the share of the developed world has come down very radically. It's about 55%. The share of the developing countries has increased very substantially. So the share of the developing countries is going up, the share of developing countries is coming down. What is happening is, as the IMF has rightly said, this year 80% of the global growth is going to come from the global south countries. The global south is going to contribute to 80% of the growth. And in the next 2 decades, two-third, and it's quite incredible, two-thirds of the growth is going to come from global south. And this is going to happen because the demographics are in favor of global south. This young population, the population in the western part of the world is aging. And if growth is going to come, all the growth is going to come from global south, then you need greater flow of financial resources for the global south. Unfortunately, the international financial architecture and the multilateral financing institutions which are created post-World War II are not designed for many of these issues. The second trend that is taking place is that there is a movement away from the big tech digitally to models which are open source, open API, interoperable model, which allow for greater innovation and allow for private-public play, which India has demonstrated through identity, banking, fast payments, etc. And the third key trend that is taking place is that there is a massive, because of climate action, there's a massive transition taking place in terms of just an inclusive energy transition. So India is at the forefront of all these 3 transitions. We are driving young demographics, we are driving global growth, we are driving digital infrastructure through digital public infrastructure, and we are driving renewable energy, and we are driving green hydrogen, which will replace fossil fuel. So today we import 200 billion worth of fossil fuel. Our aim is to become an exporter of clean energy by 2047. And these 3 trends will really redefine the world of tomorrow.
Mr. Kant, which are the key takeaways you think? I mean, India, of course, is driving these important items of the agenda, like you just mentioned. It so happens that these are areas where already India is at the forefront. So India is like a great shining example, particularly in areas like DPI, where people are really marveling at the kind of progress India has made. What do you think as we approach the end of the year and the end of the presidency? What do you think are the key areas where you think India will be able to sort of give key takeaways? And what are your expectations as the presidency sort of is handed over at the end of the year?
So a couple of issues. One is that throughout the presidency, India has been the voice of the global south. The Prime Minister when he launched the G20 presidency, the first thing he did was to have a meeting with 125 heads of state to understand what they wanted during India's presidency. And those became our key priorities for G20. So first and foremost was that if the world is, one third of the world is facing recession, then you need to drive strong, sustainable, inclusive global growth, which is very important. The second is that if you look at sustainable development goals, and we are at the midway point of 2030, only 12 of the 169 SDGs are on track. The post-COVID era has actually led to regression in sustainable development goals. So education, health, nutrition are very critical for the world, and accelerating the pace of implementation of SDG is very important. The third is climate action and climate finance. But both climate action and climate finance and SDG require long-term financing for developing countries. And therefore, we've said that our fourth priority will be the reform, redesign, and the restructuring of the multilateral development institutions for the 21st century. And therefore, working on this with all the countries to redesign and reformulate them is a critical task, and allow greater flow of resources from billions to trillions is a very, very important component of our presidency. And therefore, it's important that these institutions get redesigned. And fifthly, the fact that you need technological transformation, you need digital public infrastructure like we've done. During COVID, we were able to provide resources to 800 million people, cashless, paperless, into their bank accounts. And today, over 650 schemes of the government, we put money and resources into their account. And the fact that we do almost 46% of the digital fast payments in the world, we do 11x more than Europe and America, we do 4x more than China. Digital payments, everybody does it on the mobile, using QR codes now. So that, if you look at the world, 4 billion people do not have an identity. 3 billion people do not have a bank account. 133 countries do not have a fast payment mechanism. So you need to take the model of DPI of India to the rest of the world, especially the global south. That's important. So we needed an acceptance of digital public infrastructure. You needed an acceptance of the framework for digital public infrastructure, because there's no global definition. The world does not recognize DPI at the moment. So we are going to do that during our presidency. And lastly, as the Prime Minister said very clearly, that our presidency must drive women-led development, women empowerment, gender equality, because 50% of the world will be women. And without them, you can't drive growth. So you need to have better learning outcomes, health outcomes, better nutritional standards for them. And that is what we are driving at. But clearly, the focus is on the global south. We've shifted the voice away from the developed world to the developing world. We've demonstrated that G20 will be the voice of the global south.
That's absolutely right, Mr. Kant. Just before this session, the World Economic Forum President Borge Brande was here. He mentioned something very interesting, that he sees over the next maybe 10 years or so, G3 emerging, where India will be one of the three with US and China. What are your thoughts? Do you think, in a sense, this G20 presidency has sort of laid the foundation for India to be really, really at the center stage of world global growth and prosperity and drive that agenda?
So we are now the fifth largest economy in the world. We were the 10th in 2014. We've come to the fifth. We will definitely attempt, as the Prime Minister said, to be the third largest economy by 2027 end. But our objective has to be to grow at high rates to be a $10 trillion economy by 2030. And that's critical. And I quite agree with Borge that this is really the India's decade. And we've carried out all the structural reforms. We have young demographics in our favor. We are firing on several cylinders, from services to manufacturing to agricultural productivity to urbanization. All these are key trends, and therefore digital public infrastructure will enable us to leapfrog. Now you need the states to be, Indian states to be the key champions of India's growth story. So if India grows at 8% plus for 3 decades or more, I think we'll be definitely be the key players in the world. I think this is truly India's decade. This is the rise of India's decade for various reasons, and we must demonstrate our will that the reforms that have been carried out, the structural changes that have been made, must be implemented by the states as well to enable India to emerge as one of the big key players. But this is truly India's decade.
Mr. Kant, yesterday you were at the B20. I heard you speak very eloquently about many of these points. I also heard you say something very interesting about growth with free trade. As countries become a little more inward looking and all of that, how do you think that will be one of the key challenges the G20 will have to work on collectively and ensure that that really takes place?
So, sort of, we've done an analysis of previous pandemics. And if you look at previous pandemics which have taken place in the world, after every pandemic, you've had a story of protectionism for the next 5 to 6 years. Every country starts doing protectionism, and you're seeing this in several you see this in the Inflation Reduction Act or the Chips Act in America. You see this happening in China, the big economies. But it's important that to understand that actually free trade has lifted very vast segments of population above the poverty line. Every time India has grown, it's grown on the back of exports. Whenever we do good well in exports, India grows. So exports are very critical for India's growth story. I've been a long-term believer that exports will be the key to our growth story in the future. And therefore, India must become a very major exporting nation. This would require size and scale of manufacturing. That's what we've attempted through the production-linked incentive scheme. And my belief is that free trade is very, very important for India to be a key player in the global economy in the years to come. We need to drive manufacturing to penetrate global markets. We must be a key exporter and penetrate global markets, particularly the American and the European markets.
Where this B20 this year is also particularly important is that it stresses under India's leadership also the role of the private sector in many of the areas. For instance, in climate change, in the whole funding part of climate change, in SDGs, in pushing the SDG agenda. Where do you think, how do you see the reaction? You've been speaking to a lot of the top global corporations which have come to Delhi. How do you think the whole global corporate world is reacting to these things?
So it's not, the first priority, as I said, is strong, sustainable, inclusive, balanced growth for the world. Because the world is in recession right now. It's not possible to grow without the private sector. Private sector has to be the driver. The corporates have to drive growth. The government can be a facilitator, can be a catalyst in ensuring that private sector grows. And that's why India's B20 presidency was very important. And India's B20 presidency has been done very well. The task force reports have been absolutely brilliant. They've produced some excellent results. They worked in partnership with the private sector, and they will really help to drive the growth story of India. That's very, very important. And therefore, we are truly believers that the private sector will be the key to the global growth story. And we strongly believe, like many other countries do, that we lay emphasis on private sector really driving production and productivity in the world. Essentially, that's important. The global value chains are important. Demonopolizing these global value chains from one country to several countries is important. In the long run, it's the private sector which drives growth, and India's G20 presidency has assisted and supported B20 in a very big way. This was probably the best B20 ever held.
Do you think there was this proposal which was put forward as, I think, one of the task force recommendations of a 0.2% contribution by the corporates globally to sustainable goals and to climate change? Do you see that actually happening? We've done it in India, like it was told, that we've done the 2% sort of contribution of profits in the CSR space. Do you see that happening at a global level?
So, Saurav, it's a very interesting question. And it's important to understand that actually 1% of the corporates account for 40% of greenhouse gas emission in the world. 1%. The challenge is that we don't have machine readable data. We are not able to put that data in front of the public to say that these are the 40%, these are the companies which are contributing to 40% of the greenhouse gas emission. Nobody is clear about that. And then we do not have a Moody's like we rate countries. You are rating countries, but you don't rate corporates on the basis of their greenhouse gas emission. So what you need is that the corporates, the stock exchanges across the world must have one interoperable framework. We must have machine readable data saying that these are corporates polluting, and we must penalize them, and we must say there will be a credit rating to them on the basis of their greenhouse gas emission, and markets will penalize them. That's the most important thing in the world to my mind today. But more important is that at least these companies which contribute to 40% of the greenhouse gas emission, not 0.2%, but I think 1%, they must contribute to climate action and SDGs. But that's a process in evolution. That's a very good thought idea which has come in from B20. We'll try and discuss with the G20 and try and take it forward.
So that's something you'll definitely pursue at the
Of course,
G20
of course. All fascinating ideas, all interesting ideas are there to be
This is a
pursued.
very, very interesting one of getting the large corporates, global corporates to contribute. He says 1% of their profits to climate action because they are the top 40%, 40 companies are the biggest polluting. Mr. Kant, I'll come back to the other big issue of the reform of multilateral development banks. Now, that's again a challenge. There is a big report which has already been put out. The second report, where Mr. Singh, N.K. Singh, is one of the co-chairs, is also expected. What are the expectations you have that this will actually again go to fruition? Because that, as you rightly said, is critical to the the taking forward of the SDG goals, financing of the global south in that sense, bringing in more funds for the global south. How do you see that taking place?
So there are several components to this. The first report has been brought out, and the finance ministers, the finance track, the FMCBG as it is called, the finance bank, and the central bank governors have sent it back, noted it and sent it back to the boards of the respective financial institutions to have a look to see what more funding they can do within their existing equity base, within their capital framework, capital adequacy framework. What more lending can they do without because for them, maintaining their credit rating is also important. So what more lending can they do within that? And that's quite a bit can be done. And that's for the individual banks to see. The second bit is that how are you able to use your balance sheet, or if not your balance sheet, many other balance sheets, to be able to do more of private sector lending. There's no shortage of money in the world. I mean, there's 350 trillion. The world needs 6 to 7 trillions. But there is 350 trillion available in the world. 150 trillion is available with sovereign wealth funds and pension funds. How do you make that money move to the global south? Because the risks here are more. So the balance sheets, if they can be used to do more of indirect lending, that is, blended finance, that is, to my mind, credit. How do you credit enhance? How do you do first loss guarantees? There are various ways to provide more lending. So that needs to be done. That is, we are going to do no more direct lending. We are going to do indirect lending. And on the back of what we lend, we'll do 15x more lending. That's the key to my mind. And that is where these institutions need to move towards. Thirdly, I think to the international financial architecture, what is happening is that resources are moving from developing countries to the developed world. It could be vice versa. Inflation in the developed part of the world leads to higher interest rates, and then it moves. Yeah, so the financial architecture needs to be restructured.
The other area, Mr. Kant, where India has actually shown the way, and again, this particular G20 presidency is sort of setting the stage, is on startups. Now, this is the first time the startup infrastructure has come into the center stage, and there has been an entire Startup 20 which has been set up. Tell us a little more about what you expect as the outcomes from that.
So it started from the fact that we've been able to establish the third best ecosystem in the startup movement in the world in a very short period.
Yes.
And we have over about 110,000 startups now. We have over 110 unicorns. And therefore, we thought that if technological innovation and technological developments have to take place, then you need to put the startups together. So we've had a very lively, very vibrant startup movement for the first time, which was done during our presidency. We've had all the countries vigorously participate in it. And I think a lot of young people participated in this because we showed that actually these are startups, many of them are national assets because they've used the digital identity to do paperless, cashless credit. Several of them have done paperless, cashless wealth creation. Young startup like Zeroda controls about 29% of the stock market, gone to tier 2, tier 3 and cities. And then you have number of young startups like GoDigit and Acco, which are doing insurance on the mobile, on the go. So what you're seeing is identity, banking, wealth creation, fast payment, insurance, all happening through innovation on the mobile. And the cost of acquisition of a customer has fallen rapidly. It's important that, if you look at the world, 133 countries do not even have a fast payment mechanism. So you need to take this model there so that you can provide liquidity to the people without any leakages. And that is really the model for the world, that you have fast payments for them. That will require digital identity. That will require bank accounts, and that will require fast payments. And this is a unique model of India which can be taken to the rest of the world.
Mr. Kant, you're the G20 Sherpa. Now, we will have the Leaders Summit coming up in early September. Typically, that is, of course, a broader agenda. There's a bigger platform. How much of the B20 takeaways do you realistically see being discussed and agreed upon at this year's G20 Leaders Summit?
So a lot of B20 recommendations, as communiques, are being examined. In many ways, they will find a very distinct component in the as we go forward in our discussions. Because without the private sector, you can't have global growth. If 1/3 of the world is suffering from a crisis of slowdown, and we must understand Germany has gone recession now.
That's right.
1/3 of the world is in recession. 75 countries of the world are in global debt crisis. So if you want to solve that without private sector, you can't solve it. So private sector has to play a very key, critical, and a very major role in this.
The Prime Minister, in fact, now that you mentioned the debt crisis also, he's in our interview, he's spoken about the whole debt restructuring piece. Where do you see that heading and the role India is playing on that?
So, there are several countries impacted by the global debt crisis. This issue has been discussed extensively in the finance track. So you've seen the Sri Lanka solution, you've seen Zambia, Chad, Ethiopia, many other countries finding a solution to this because of the various initiatives that India has taken. That's a burning priority of the global, of the finance track, actually.
And what India, of course, has done the entire, some of these things which we just discussed. How much of it do you see as the presidency eventually changes hands? How much do you see is the issue of continuity, which I want to raise here? How much do you see actually taking place beyond? Now, India can do this much within its presidency. How much of influence do you think India can wield carrying forward these wonderful, new initiatives which we have done into the next year and for subsequent years?
So, Saurav, for the first time in G20, you have 4 developing countries, one after another, holding the G20 presidency.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Indonesia was hit by the Ukraine war in very, very big way. So it wasn't, I'd honestly be saying that they did their best. But ambition was lacking because of the COVID and because of this. But during India's presidency, right from the word go, we've put Ukraine on the back burner. And we've said that the ambitions of the developing countries and the global south must be in the forefront. So we brought the agenda of the global south, the developing countries, and we said that growth is taking place in these countries. And therefore, we put this agenda of development in the forefront and put every other issue at the back front. And therefore, my view is that that should be the strategy of Brazil, that should be the strategy of South Africa, that they should continue to bring the global South and the developing countries right in the forefront. Because without that, you will not be able to uplift people. If you want a human-centric approach to growth, you can't do that without the developing countries driving, because they are really young demographics. Can you believe it? 6 of the fastest growing countries in the world are today in Africa. 6 of the top 12. So that means growth is going to come from India, it's going to come from Africa. And therefore, you need long-term financing to drive this growth. Without this, you will not be able to lift the humanity. Without this, you can't have global growth.
Which is what the Prime Minister told us also. If you do not include the African nations, how can you talk about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that development for everybody?
So this is the first time that the Prime Minister wrote to all the leaders that African Union must become a permanent member of G20. That was a bold move. And that means that you're providing inclusion to G20. And that means that you'll actually be giving a voice to 55 countries of Africa during the G20. And that's a very big move. And that is being discussed and debated, and most leaders across the world have very favorably reacted to it.
By when do you see that actually happening?
During the Leaders Summit.
So that because the Prime Minister also spoke very hopefully about that.
No, we are very, very optimistic about this. Prime Minister's voice has had a big resonance across the world.
Do you think that that could be one of the biggest takeaways and the legacy India will leave after this G20 presidency, the inclusion of the African Union?
Yeah, that'll be one of the big, but let me tell you that India will leave behind a lot of legacies in terms of development. Huge legacies. We are not talking about the content right now, because most of that gets discussed in the last meeting. But all our ministerials have been very content-driven. We've been very ambitious as far as the content is concerned. They'll be discussed in the final Sherpa meeting and finally approved by the leaders. So you'll have to wait till the Leaders Summit. But our presidency will be very content-rich. It'll be very ambitious, very bold, very aggressive, and very ambitious.
Do you expect a clear statement at the end of the
Yeah. I'm very hopeful that on all development issues, we'll have a consensus.
And finally, Mr. Kant, you have been sort of at the center of driving so many of these initiatives. What has been going on in your mind? You've done so many other, you've performed so many other roles earlier. You've been pivotal in Niti Aayog, and now this is a global stage, really. What do you think? What drives you? What has been this whole driving factor over the last 1 year?
Well, just remain focused and sleep well. That's all, and do lots and lots of exercise.
Yesterday you said you sleep very well.
I sleep very well.
And you don't really allow these
nothing.
concerns, global concerns to really eat into your sleep.
No, not at all. Not at all. Don't get unnecessarily worried.
Be calm
and remain focused. Remain focused.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kant. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and many, many good wishes to you for the future.
Thanks. Great pleasure.
Thank you, sirs, for that lovely session. Mr. Kant, I'd like to request you to stay back on stage. And I'd like to call upon Mr. Dinesh Bhatia, our Group CEO at the India Today Group, to felicitate Mr. Kant on stage. So, on charting that path to becoming, well, a major power in the year 2047, we want to talk about several sectors that will be disrupted. We've spoken so much about technology, we've spoken about, well, the economic aspect as well. And now it's a very different facet that we're going to talk about. In the next session, we will focus on India's potential for significant economic growth and the role of the capital markets in driving this growth. The next session is aptly titled, The Equity-Led Path to a $20 Trillion Economy. It is going to be moderated by my colleague, Shailendra Bhatnagar, editor markets at Business Today TV. And our esteemed guests that will be joining him on this particular chat will be Ashish Chauhan, MD and CEO, NSE. Can we have a huge round of applause, please?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shail Bhatnagar, and we have a very special guest today, Mr. Ashish Chauhan. He's the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of India's most successful startup. That's the National Stock Exchange. All of us are in some way or the other connected to the National Stock Exchange. Some of our wealth resides there. And over the next 25 years, India will create more wealth than what she did in the previous 250. And in the next 10 years, you will see more wealth created on the stock exchanges than what we've seen in the last 100 years. And the man squarely in the center of all this is Mr. Chauhan. A very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, we will structure this talk in a manner that is beneficial to all. Please tighten your seatbelts. And if you haven't so far participated in India's booming financial markets, today's the time to start. And the reason why I tell you this is because the amount of wealth creation that we'll see over the next 2.5 decades when India moves from $4 trillion to $20 trillion is going to be phenomenal. And Mr. Chauhan is going to help us create that roadmap. Ashishji, I'll first start with the fact that, India was known to be a country of snake charmers. And here is an organization which went online from day one and created one of the finest exchanges globally, which is the largest in terms of derivatives and the third largest in terms of market capitalization. You were there from the start in 1999. Tell us how it happened.
Thank you, Shail. Pleasure being here. It's an interesting story in a way that after Harshad Mehta scam, the government wanted to set up an exchange which did not have the influence of brokers. And that's where they told IDBI, which was a public sector institution, to set up NSE. And they selected 5 people to set that up from within their ranks. I was one of them. So that's how I ended up becoming part of NSE. Otherwise, I was a banker, I'm an engineer, but that's where basically the NSE story began. And in some ways, post-independence, we wanted to be a socialist economy. And markets were basically something which were tolerated at most. They were satta bazaar, right? They were never to create help in nation building. Only in 91, when we started liberalizing, and we saw how the rest of the world was using markets for nation building, for capital formation, for wealth creation, for job creation. That's where we wanted to do something which was clean and which was automated. And it was a wish, like any other wish, right? But to do things, what happened from 92, immediately after Rashad Mehta scam, this team was created. And between, say, 1992 to 94, we planned and executed. 94, November 3, we started. It was a sci-fi movie happening in Purnia, in 1994. Nobody even thought that these dhoti topi walas, they don't even understand computers. Even the scientists don't have computers in India. Today, all of us have mobile phones and we run around. But those days, it used to take 5 years to get a telephone line at home. And to make it work every day, you had to pay the bribe to the linesman. Linesmen used to be the most dowry takers in those days, if you recall, right? So from that situation to create an exchange which you would work on a screen, match on the screen, be available to anywhere in India continuously was a total sci-fi thing. and somehow it happened. It basically was the largest technology demonstrator India had. It was the largest demonstrator of India's brain power in early 1993-94. After that, Y2K came, India's IT prowess started getting known to the world. But every IT company I recall used to bring their potential white clients into NS to show that India ye kar sakta hai.
Correct.
Right? So it started not only a stock market revolution, but it started IT revolution. It started wireless telecom revolution. The first satellite telecom two-way was created by me for NSE. After that, all the cellulars and all banking revolution, all e-payments, e-governance, whatever we see today in IT, in all the sort of e-commerce, everything, it was the first e-commerce activity in India those days. In 1994, nobody called it e-commerce. Today we can call it. But effectively, that's where it helped India so much, not only in stock markets, but also in just creating that confidence, making it so much more automated, so much more confident than ever before. And over from 94 to today, 29 years, what has happened? When NSE started, the market capitalization of India totally was around 4 lakh crore rupees. Today, how much it is? 4 crore rupees. 4 multiplied by 10 raised to 14. 4 के पीछे 14 zero लगाने हैं. To make it simple, $3.6 trillion, okay? In rupee terms, it has gone up 80 times. In that 29 years, 80 times rupee terms returns, but dollar terms, it has gone from $120 billion to now almost $3.8 trillion, more than 30 times in dollar terms. Warren Buffett, if he had just invested in Nifty, he would have been as rich as he is today. You don't require to be a Warren Buffett in India to multiply your wealth. It has helped India create jobs. It has helped India create wealth. It has also democratized. To those days, probably 20, 30, 50 lakh people used to invest in stock markets. Today, 7.5 crore PAN number, unique PAN numbers are registered with me. That 7.5 crore unique PAN numbers is actually 5 crore households. 5 crore households is 17% of all India's households directly now trade with NSE. And if you take EPFO, everything else, it is now 25 to 30%. 1 out of every 3 households is probably connected in direct or indirect way. And that is also true on the wealth. Today, that 3.6 trillion or $3.8 trillion wealth, which NSE represents, is also 1/3 of India's total wealth. 1 out of every 3 rupee India considers wealth, including this building, all the tumblers and buckets, and all the jewelries and all the buildings in the country, and all the land. 1/3 is basically coming out of stock markets. And what is stock market, right? Unknown people are investing in business of unknown people. A person sitting in Jorhat or a Dibrugarh is putting her hard-earned 1,000 rupees into a company in Salem, in Tamil Nadu. She's never going to visit. She doesn't even know what that business is going to look like. But she has a complete confidence that her money will be spent well, and whenever that business makes profit, she will get that small share of that dividend. It is such a beautiful thing. Indian economy, a poor country like ours with $2,500 per capita, was not supposed to have any such thing. There is no country with $2,500 per capita income and such a market. There is no country with $5,000 per capita income and such a market. There is no country with $10,000 per capita income in such a market. There is no country with $20,000 per capita income in such a market. Only one market is that, China. Wherever prices go down, government has to go and buy. In my market, government only taxes, right?
Absolutely.
So effectively, this is a very, very precious thing that has happened in India. It has helped India. It will continue to help. Whatever growth India has to do in economics, socially, otherwise, because what I say is, even dharmasya moolam artha. So even if you have to do religion, you have to have artha. That is money. And that's where Today, despite all importance being given to banking system, today the stock markets are 1.5 times or more larger than the entire banking system's asset size.
Right. Mr. Chauhan, let's take this argument a little forward. As of now, if you see, in the 6 hours and 15 minutes that the National Stock Exchange trades on a regular basis, you have about 1,300 crore transactions happening seamlessly without human intervention. That's about 200 crore transactions per second. I have known Mr. Chauhan over the last 25 years. He's a very modest man, but a very, very large part of the success that we see in India as far as IT is concerned rests on his shoulders. What we take for granted, online payments, seamless banking, permanent settlements that happen without any human intervention, is because of the IT prowess that the National Stock Exchange exhibited. And behind that has been Mr. Chauhan. Apart from at the National Stock Exchange, he's worked previously with the Bombay Stock Exchange and has written a wonderful book called The Bombay Stock Exchange, Temple of Wealth Creation. Mr. Chauhan, 25 years from now, India has a global macro tailwind which is fairly strong at this point of time. Where do you think we will be? Design a roadmap for us so that the 125 people that are sitting here may benefit financially from participating in this wonderful journey that we call the National Stock Exchange.
So I give you a background, right? So where we have reached is a function of where we were.
Yes.
So in 1995, the base year of Nifty index, okay, now it's 28 years. It was 1,000 on November 3, 95, okay? Today, it is 19,300. Market capitalization, as I told you, is now $3.8 trillion. It was 120 billion. It has gone up 30 times in last 28 years. Now, today, we have reached that $3.8 trillion market cap and around $3.5 trillion of GDP. If you just take a simple growth framework of 7% or 7.5% as the annual growth rate over next 25 years, some years will be very good, some years will be very bad. You might have even a 10% year, and you might also have a 3% year. But on average, if you take 7%, which is feasible because last 28 years we have grown similarly, right? So if that is true, the market has gone from 1,000 to 19,300. Similarly, would the GDP also grow from that much, that is 3.5 trillion dollars by 19 times? That will make it almost $70 trillion. Now, even America today is close to $28 trillion. China is somewhere close to $18 trillion. So effectively, we have grown reasonably fast over last so many years. But if we continue to grow at that pace, our markets, assuming it grows, say, even 15 times, today we are 3.8 multiplied by 15 would be $40-50 trillion. For me, it may not happen. Even at half, it's still $20 trillion. And that's what somewhere I think the heading earlier given was that will Indian market reach $40 trillion? It's possible because just 7% simple compounded growth, you will figure out that it will reach probably $40-50 trillion. But that is not how the world works, right? And the sky, I mean, the tree doesn't go to sky. I mean, it will keep on growing and somewhere it'll start plateauing. But the room which we have over next 25 years is phenomenal. Today, we have a unique opportunity, and we are in a unique place as a country because last 1,000 years, when for me, I mean, I'm a technology man, and technology is what changes the world. Technology is what creates wealth. The world actually falls around the new technologies and starts using it. And last 1,000 years created more wealth than what was created in, say, last 10 lakh years by the human race, right? And that Why did it get created is because technology has evolved rapidly.
Right,
And
sir.
last 1,000 years, India was not in the race only. India was not even in the stadium. India was not even 10 kilometers away from the stadium. We were not even spectators, right? Today, when technology race is being run, we are at the starting line. In fact, we are supposed to win going forward. And if we don't uh, sort of uh, go in a wrong direction, there is nothing which can stop me. And if you had asked me, say 30 years back when I was setting up NSE, that India would be so good, so rich, I would not have even imagined. And that's why what the technology is going to bring with its newer waves, which are coming faster and faster, it's going to be phenomenal going.
Right, sir. So while Mr. Chauhan has spoken about the GDP part, since he's the creator of Nifty, let me just give you a mathematical exploration. Over the next 25 years, if Nifty compounds very simply at 11%, and let me regress a bit, if we are at 18,000, over the next 25 years, we will have 4 compounding zones. So the Nifty will go from 18 to 36, 36 to 72, 72 to 144, and from 144 to 288. 2,88,000. Let's presume this Goldilocks scenario does not continue and we are somewhere like 2 lakh or 1,75,000 on the Nifty. Remember, this is just the Nifty compounding, not a good equity diversified fund, which will be far better and will give you a phenomenal return. We've seen these kind of returns happening in the past, and they're definitely going to happen in the future. Mr. Chauhan, regulatorily, we are probably the best possible exchange in the world when it comes to seamless transactions, full-time connectivity, payments happening like clockwork, now of course T+1. Where do you think is the next technological advance coming?
In a way, even this T+1, I mean, this NSE was so much out of place in 1994. Nobody could even believe that America, New York is not automated.
Yes.
Europe is not automated. How India became automated. And that is true today also. What we do is a sci-fi to America. I call America a 19th century technology in 21st century. All over the world, we recently implemented T+1 settlement. T+1 settlement simply is, if you trade today, you get your money and stock tomorrow. Nowhere in the world T+1 is there. They talk a lot. They will tell you about all the nice things that will happen if T+1 happens, but they continue to talk. We execute. So that is the difference between us and them. And today, literally last 1 year, we have been called, at least in 15 world events by my colleagues, how did we implement T+1? Because it's not only a technological prowess which we display, but also societal prowess of handling newer processes, newer technologies, which is what basically gives me that confidence that regulatorily what needs to be done, our regulators are also techno-savvy. Many of them are engineers.
Yes.
But if you just saw Mr. Amitabh Kant, right? You have also seen Mr. Nitin Gadkari in the morning. I mean, this kind of policymakers, this kind of executors, what is the choice we have, right? We have to be the best. We have to continue to be the best. That is what the expectation of Indian public is. That's the expectation from our bosses is.
Right. So, Mr. Chauhan, now in the remaining 11 minutes, I'll ask you questions which are pertaining to the National Stock Exchange. You've set up a wonderful macro base for phenomenal growth. Tell me, we have about 4 or 5 indices that trade fairly regularly in the F&O format. Is there a plan? You have about 19 indices. How will the market grow in size? You execute about 200 crore transactions an hour. The capacity is 10 times more. Where is this going to come from?
In a way, your argument, basically your question is, what are the new products you see in the market? See, one is the equity indexes, right? So, for example, we are trying to bring IT index back, Nifty IT, Nifty Pharma. Those are the kind of things we plan to have back. But more importantly, there are fundamental gaps in the Indian market offerings. One is on the interest rate. Interest rate futures are not that successful yet. We have also proposed corporate bond index futures. We also proposed government bond index futures, because all over the world, the bond indexes markets are like several times larger than equities indexes market, right? So basically interest rate markets is what we need to bring. Similarly, electricity futures. CERC, which is the electricity regulator, regulates the spot market through spot exchanges and also, of course, long-term contracts. But now SEBI has got the powers to regulate the futures and options market in electricity. So that is where basically, again, we are working. Similarly, carbon credit. That's where, again, a new, all the SDG and all those targets, net zero and all, will only come out if we have a carbon credit market. And so that also we have started working on. So it's not only the stock markets where you need to work, because our main purpose is to help India create wealth, and that will come out of the capital formation and not incessant trading in indexes. But because we also are world's largest exchange of any type, just to give you a perspective, today, as you said, we do 1,500 crore orders in one day, 6 hours, 15 minutes. But we also trade 20 crore orders every day. On every Thursday, we will be closing 20 crores trades a day. New York Stock Exchange today does around 5% of our number of trades. They might be trading more in volume, but today the largest next exchange is in Brazil, which is 20% of our size.
Wow.
So effectively, if somebody says, no, have you looked at other countries, other things? Boss, now they are too small, right? And that's where this is literally first time I'm giving you this information, just to give you that comfort that what you take for granted every day, when you place an order, you get exactly the trade price, and next day you get your stock once you pay up. It happens by magic, but behind that magic, there's a lot of organization, a lot of planning, a lot of execution that happens. And that's where India's IT prowess, but also India's ability to organize itself well, and all its people, that is you and me, actually are using that in a disciplined way, is a phenomenal thing which no other country is even able to grasp.
Absolutely. Mr. Chauhan, for all the people sitting in the audience, and all of us, remember, ladies and gentlemen, will live far, far longer than what we actually hope to be. If somebody is wanting to, participate in this wonderful journey that will see us at $20 trillion in GDP 25 years from now, and maybe far, far higher in the Nifty than what it is today, what would you suggest?
No, one thing which I've always said is, investors have to be investors. Somehow a perception has been created that buying in the morning and selling in the afternoon is called investment. It is basically satta, right? It is trading. And my humble request to every investor is that please don't indulge in derivatives trading if you don't know about it. Please don't buy in the morning and sell in the evening by watching on television or getting your 2020 reports and sort of acting like as if you will make billions in one day. Boss, this is a place to create wealth and not lose whatever you have, right? So might as well, if you don't know, if you don't have the time or expertise, go to mutual funds, go to portfolio managers, but don't just believe in some tips which comes to you, or somebody calls up saying, sir, on television, I have these 100 shares and I have taken this, what is stop loss? You don't have to know that. Because you have other job, you have other work, you have other business. If you want to participate in investments. Why? Is because if you put money in gold, last 25 years, gold has given very low return compared to stock markets. Stock market returns are almost 14-15% year on year compounded. As I told you, 1,000 rupees invested in Nifty in 1995 would have become 19,300 rupees today. But on top of that, if you take the dividends, it would have become actually 25,000 rupees. 1,000 rupees to 20,000 rupees in 28 years, that is 25 times. No real estate. एक दो जगह पे हुआ होगा, but otherwise, no real estate has given you that. No gold, no fixed deposits can give you that. If you think India is going to grow, invest in markets, but stay invested. Don't get impatient. because everyone thinks he's Rakesh Jhunjhunwala. Unfortunately, expired after that, there is no Rakesh Jhunjhunwala born, right? So please stay long. Don't try to capture the lowest part saying I'll invest now and then it will go up and I'll sort of sell at the peak. There is nobody who is God, right? Stay invested long, you will benefit. That's how people in the long-term investments have benefited. And my request is don't indulge in day-to-day trading, no derivatives if you don't know.
Wonderful. So this is the best advice that at least I have heard, and a lot of us actually put it into practice. Spending time in the market is more important than timing the market. And Mr. Chauhan says it really well. We'll keep a certain amount of time for Q&A if you have some. My final question to you, sir, is that you are a turnaround specialist, and you were asked to actually summoned to take care of the National Stock Exchange in 2022 after the Himalayan Yogi scandal surfaced because of SEBI's order. A lot of people have always hoped that the National Stock Exchange will be listed one day. And of course, you are the guy who actually helps the rest of the world list on the markets. So when do we expect your IPO to hit the capital markets?
So this is the second most frequent question asked to me. The first most frequent question asked to me is, what will be the Nifty after 1 year, right? And I say that my job is like a traffic police, I can tell you which cars brake well. I cannot tell you which cars actually function well in terms of everything else. And similarly, I'm a regulator broadly, and also a service provider in terms of ensuring your transactions go well, and also an umpire to an extent, because I also have to run the regulations. But overall, I wouldn't know what would be the Nifty tomorrow or next moment or.
But you would certainly know when you'll get listed.
Yeah, and similarly, on the listing, basically, as you are all aware, there were issues at NSE, and SEBI has certain apprehensions about our sort of being able to meet their expectations, so that India from 7.5 crores investors, it goes to a double or triple. And for that, whatever confidence is required for SEBI in terms of our processes, our procedures, our technology, our intentions. So that is where, as and when SEBI becomes more comfortable, they will tell us to apply, and that is the time we will apply. Otherwise, once the approval comes, the process of doing IPO is mechanical. It takes 3 to 6 months, probably 7 months max. And I have done many IPOs, including BSE's IPO in my tenure. So in some ways, IPOs are not new to me. But once we get an approval, because we are not a normal company, we are a regulator, frontline regulator. And whenever SEBI feels comfortable, that's what they will tell us to sort of move forward. And that's what I would want to convey to all the investors, that, and also whoever is listening, saying, doing an IPO is a great thing, because it actually increases or improves the corporate governance of any company, because investors keep on asking very tough questions, and from the minutest to the most macro, and that's why companies, especially public companies like this, should be listed. But again, as and when the regulators feel comfortable, given the experiences they had with us earlier.
Okay. Just for the record, 13 years before Mr. Chauhan started his second tenure in the National Stock Exchange in 2022, he was the chairman managing director of the Bombay Stock Exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll open this house for at least 2 questions. Please feel free. There's a gentleman sitting there, I'm sure in the right age to start investing, or maybe, put in more money. Yes, sir, to you. Yes, we can hear you.
It's a very interesting question. You brought in Gift City also. Gift City is another thing which we did not touch, but it's like Hong Kong for China. Gift City is for India. So effectively, Hong Kong helped China grow rapidly over last 40 years because it had a Anglo-Saxon legal system, English-speaking people, and that was used by China to funnel a lot of investments from abroad into China. China doesn't have a similar legal system like we have, or any other European country or America has, and that's where basically the gift city was conceptualized by Honorable Prime Minister for ensuring that we are able to also funnel some of the funds that are required for very rapid growth of India from abroad. And that is the purpose. We started a new segment there, the ESG segment, or what we call green segment. And similarly in India, Indian domestic area, which is NSE Mumbai, we have also got now ESG regulations from SEBI. So there are two aspects to it. One is that every company which works in India will have to follow certain standards. That is what the government standards coming. Then if you come and list your company on Indian exchanges, then you have to follow slightly higher standards or substantially higher standards in some ways. And that's where the SEBI regulations on ESG come in. And then the third part is basically ESG bonds, which are the companies actually list their equities, but they also raise funds through bonds. And the ESG bonds can be basically the green bonds or those kind of things. We have a separate segment also on the NSE for listing of those, and we, like many of the municipal bonds, are structured as green bonds or ESG bonds because of the fact that they help you save the environment and other things. So that's where many other companies which are also going to require funds and want to raise funds without diluting the equity, they will also come through ESG sort of bonds. And similarly, many of them will want to raise funds from investors abroad. That's where either they do it in NSE domestically in Mumbai, or they do it through the gift city. Today in gift city, we have close to $80–85 billion of bonds already listed, out of which some portion is probably $9–10 billion are on the ESG side. The rest is what we call masala bonds and sort of dollar bonds and stuff like that. And in India also, we would have a few $1 billion of bonds already on the ESG side.
Siddharth, you have a question.
In the interest of time, I'll keep it really short since you spoke about T1 and how India leads the world. And I ask you this question seriously: is real-time settlement even possible to consider?
Real-time settlement, in a way, when I said T+1 is a sci-fi movie happening in India, rest of the world is just watching with bated breath that how did these guys do it. And then our regulators have now started talking about the real-time settlement, right? And the real-time settlements are possible in India because of the way our payment systems now are so real-time. They were not so few years back. And so one side is the payment side, that is the banking system. Other side is the depository side, which is on our side, securities market side, where they own, they keep the record of your holdings. And if they are able to do it on real time, I should be able to do it. But both buyer and seller have to give it in a way in a very short time frame. So as and when the new sort of regulations come and settle down, the implementation is something which is easy. An Indian public is able to adapt to newer and newer. We started like in 1992-3. Many of you are as old as me in this market. And you recall we used to trade in BSE for 15 days, and then settlement used to happen 45–50 days after that. So it used to be like T+60 days if you are lucky. In between, some default did not happen. Today, you are on T+1, and we think it is par for the course. We don't even think it is something unusual. And similarly, when it happens real time, it will happen so fast and so easily in Indian system, including all, because humans have to adapt to that system, and humans in India are able to adapt to literally everything. That is what I have seen, and my hope and faith is that Indians are the most adaptable people, especially when it comes to technology and speed, which is what they want. They expect speed from us, from every authority that is, and that's what we will deliver as soon as the new regulations come.
Right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful session. Thank you, Mr. Chauhan. And we won't stop you from lunch. The other point I wanted to mention was we've sort of laid a roadmap on how to make money. Just after lunch, there'll be a session on consumption, and we'll teach you how to spend that.
Well, we're looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Shail, and thanks, Mr. Chauhan. I'd like to call upon stage Dinesh Bhatia, Group CEO India Today Group, to felicitate Mr. Chauhan. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the only one standing in between you and a lovely lunch, but I must tell you that take this time out to recharge and come back, because there's an action-packed schedule in the second half and you don't want to miss it. Can you have a huge round of applause?
दुनिया में कुछ लोग कहते हैं और कुछ लोग करते हैं।
Hello and a very warm welcome once again. Good morning, namaskar, adab. Thank you very much for being here with us. Nitin Gadkari ji, as always, a great pleasure to have you here with us. He's taken the pains to come only for this event, straight from the airport. So thank you very much for that as well. A full house here. And Gadkari ji, the topic is India at 100. So I will try and not ask you questions of the present and the past. One of your ambitions, Gadkari ji, as someone we describe here as the builder of modern India, uh, is your Kashmir to Kanyakumari highway. But again, I will not ask you about that. Try and tell our audience here, when India is 100 years as a republic, what will our road infrastructure look like?
Actually, before end of 24, our national highway road infrastructure will be equal to the USA standard. So I am very much confident about it. For example, in Delhi, we have just working Delhi and out of Delhi part, that we are working on the project of 65,000 crores. I've got the list of every project. And I am confident that we will complete all the projects. After that, from Delhi to Dehradun will be 2 hours, Delhi to Haridwar 1.5 hours, Delhi to Jaipur 2 hours, Delhi to Chandigarh 2.5 hours, Chandigarh to Manali presently takes 7 to 8 hours, it will be 3 hours. Then Delhi to Amritsar 4 hours, Delhi to Katra 6 hours, Delhi to Srinagar 8 hours, Delhi to Mumbai 12 hours, then Chennai to Bangalore 2 hours, Bangalore to Mysore is already completed, is 1 hour. And in which we are developing the road infrastructure, particularly starting from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Just you take it from Manali. Before that Atal Tunnel, from going to Rohtang Pass, it takes something 3.5 hours. Now it is 8 minutes. After coming with Atal Tunnel, we are constructing 5 tunnels and roads up to Ladakh and Leh. After Ladakh and Leh, we are constructing the big tunnel in Asia, 11 kilometer, that is to be Jojila. 70% work has completed. Then after that, Jhedmore tunnel is completed. It is on the, we want to open it as early as possible now. Then it comes to Srinagar. Then Srinagar to Jammu, we are already constructing 18 tunnels, out of which 14 are completed. And before Katra, there is a highway, Delhi-Katra highway. It comes to Amritsar, Amritsar to Delhi, and then it comes to directly to Delhi-Mumbai Express Highway. And after Delhi-Mumbai, after it goes to up to Surat. Then for South India, from North India to South India, you don't need to go to Pune or Mumbai. From Surat, it will start it going to Nasik, Nasik to Ahmednagar, Ahmednagar to Solapur, Solapur to Kurnool, and Kurnool se Trivandrum, Cochin, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, and Kanyakumari. So it starts from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, express highway, axis control, the link between the countries.
Kashmir to Kanyakumari, the question that I want to ask you in a lighter note is, सर कुछ जमीन बची रहेगी, सब कुछ हाईवे, सुपर हाईवे, एक्सप्रेसवेज ही ले जाएगा पूरे कंट्री में?
नहीं कहाँ उतना है, देश में 63 लाख किलोमीटर रोड लेंथ है. आउट ऑफ इस एनएच, अभी मैं जब मंत्री बना तो 92,000 किलोमीटर था, अभी 1,46,000 किलोमीटर है. तो ये अभी भी 1.5 लाख किलोमीटर और करने की आवश्यकता है. ट्रैफिक डेंसिटी इज गुड, इकोनॉमिक वायबिलिटी इज गुड, even we can work on BOT on PPP mode, there is no problem.
Sir, we will have a great spread of highways, great expressway network, and many times the statistics are mind-boggling. But will our highways be much safer? I ask you this because our highways, roads have one of the highest fatality rates. You yourself have tried a lot in the last 10 years, but 2 decades later, how safe will India's highways be?
एक बात मैं आपको बता दूं, जो आपने 100 इयर्स की बात की थी
जी,
मैं हाईवे को इलेक्ट्रिक हाईवे बना रहा हूं, और अभी कल ही मेरे पास काफी काम पूरा हुआ है, टाटा से प्रेजेंटेशन भी हुआ. मैं दिल्ली से जयपुर और नागपुर के रिंग रोड को इलेक्ट्रिक केबल जैसे रेलवे की होती है वैसी बना रहा हूँ।
अंडरग्राउंड?
नो नो, ऊपर में।
अच्छा।
और 2 या 3 बसेस, ट्रॉली बसेस उसके ऊपर चलेंगी दिल्ली से जयपुर, और जयपुर से रिंग रोड पर घूमकर फिर वापस दिल्ली आएगी। और अभी नागपुर में भी उसको कर रहा हूँ, तो ये पहला पायलट प्रोजेक्ट है। और ये मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूँ कि दिल्ली से जयपुर बीओटी में हो सकता है क्या। और फिर मेरी विजन ये है कि फिर ट्रक भी ऐसे बनेंगे जैसे रेलवे का इंजन होता है ना, ऊपर में लगकर केबल पे चलता है, तो 2-2, 3-3 ट्रक भी उसी पे चलेंगे। और लॉजिस्टिक कॉस्ट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट। Presently, our logistic cost is 14 to 16%. China, it is 9 to 10%. And European country, 12%. I am confident at end of 24, our logistic cost will be in single digit. It will come up to 9%. So we will be more competitive in international market for export. And that is going to be a great boost for our economy, and which is very important. And the second thing about road safety. From last 9 years, I am trying my level best, but this is not a success story. We have every year 5 lakhs accidents, 1,50,000 deaths, and out of which 60% deaths belong to the age group of 18 to 34. It's very unfortunate. But there are 4-5 reasons are important. One is automobile engineering, and other is road engineering. We have taken a lot of steps regarding automobile engineering. Just 4 days before, we have launched star rating of international standard. So you will get the car with the international standard, there will be no problem. At the same time, there are road engineering, there was some black spots. We are already spending 40,000 crore for improvement of black spots. We are taking all preventive measures of international standards, from signage to marking, and even lot of things we are now making the road safety audit of the every road. For that reason, now we have prepared the syllabus, and we are taking the help from the IIT, Engineering College, Polytechnic College for making road safety audit. But the other important thing is regarding road accident is education, emergency, and enforcement. Regarding enforcement, we have already have the new Motor Vehicle Act. For that reason, we have increased the fines and all the things are there. Regarding education is very important. The behavior of the common man is the basic reason for the road accident.
Sir, is it just the common man or is it also the rich man? Just hours ago, we have had a very horrific accident. Many cars convoy, one of the biggest and safest, most expensive cars in the world, hitting a truck. Nothing happened. It was not the fault of the truck, from what we know as of news reports. Is it just an attitude that everyone has on our highways?
I'm just telling you a simple example of Merit Express Highway just 20 days before. The wrong side, the school bus driver has taken his bus on wrong side, and there was SUVs there. There was a crash and 6 deaths. Now, first of all, the most important thing is there is no fear about the law and no respect for the law in the majority people's mind. And that is to be a big problem. Somewhere, you should not talk on the phone when you are driving car or the scooter. Should have helmet. If the red signal is there, you should stop there. You should, lane discipline is very important. This is a big country, but now the people are not, now it's a very unfortunate for us. Majority of the accidents, the reason is lane discipline. And that is one of the reasons that we want to implement the law. Now we have cameras, everything. New intelligent traffic system is with us. But presently, the situation is that still we are not up to the mark. That is to be a big problem. We are highest in the world in road accident. Somewhere, this is a issue where we need help from universities, education institutions, NGOs, media. We are making campaign where we want to change the mindset of the people about the rules of the road. And now we are starting competition in the schools. Now we want to train the school children because they are the citizen of the future. So these are the problems, but we are trying. But the fact is that we are not very much satisfied about it. We are working on it.
सर, भारत चाँद पे भी पहुँच गया है और जो आपने बात कही है ये काफ़ी चिंताजनक है, क्योंकि चाँद पे पहुँच गए बट यहाँ पे लेन डिसिप्लिन नहीं रख पा रहे हैं। गडकरी जी, वन ऑफ द थिंग।
आपको एक बात बताऊं,
जी,
ये सब दिल्ली के लोग बैठे हैं।
जी।
अब मेरा बोलने में थोड़ा मैं स्पष्ट हूं, आप करो। इनको पूछो, आप क्या इतने बड़े बड़े बंगले बनाते हो, मर्सिडीज गाड़ी 2-2 4-4 रखते हो, तो घर के अंदर पार्किंग बनाते हो? पूरी गाड़ी
एक भी
जैसे
हाथ नहीं
हमने
खड़ा।
रोड इनके पार्किंग के लिए बनाया, पूरे लाइन पे लगा के रख। अब ये बड़े लोग भी है, क्या क्या फर्क पड़ता है कि अंडरग्राउंड पार्किंग बना?
तो फिर सर इसका अर्थ ये हुआ कि सड़कें छोटी होनी चाहिए, जैसे बॉम्बे में तो सड़कें ही नहीं है, तो क्या उसी से सेफ्टी बढ़ेगी क्या?
नहीं, देखो, प्रॉब्लम है कि रोड के दोनों बाजू में डेवलपमेंट।
हम्म।
अभी गोवा और केरल तो दो राज्य ऐसे हैं कि हमारे हाईवे के बाजू में ही डेवलपमेंट है। हमारी कॉस्ट इन किलोमीटर इन केरला 49 करोड़ रुपीस पर किलोमीटर लैंड एक्विजिशन। हमारे केरल के मुख्यमंत्री ने कहा कि मैं कंट्रीब्यूट करूंगा, 25,000 करोड़ दिए और मुझे आय मिलने के लिए। बोले सर हाथ जोड़ता हूँ, अभी मेरे से नहीं हो सकता। तो ये प्रॉब्लम है। और दूसरी बात, ये जो पार्किंग का प्रॉब्लम है, अभी पहले रोड की विड्थ कम, उसमें ये पार्किंग खड़ा होगा तो कैसे होगा?
तो सर 25 साल बाद क्या होगा? ऐसे ये तो बहुत भयानक, बहुत डरावना एक सॉर्ट ऑफ सिनेरियो बन रहा है। गाड़ियां भी आ रही हैं, बड़े-बड़े बंगले बन रहे हैं, बड़ी-बड़ी हाई राइजेस बन रही हैं। जो बॉम्बे का हाल है, क्या वो पूरे देश का हाल होने वाला है?
अभी मैं नागपुर में मैंने एक म्यूजिकल फाउंटेन बनाया और वहां एक 11 मंजिले में फूड प्लाजा बना रहा हूँ, पार्किंग और फूड प्लाजा। उसमें 1100 गाड़ियों का ऑटोमेटिक पार्किंग किया है। अब धीरे धीरे लोगों में अवेयरनेस आ रहा है, पब्लिक प्लेसेस में पार्किंग आ रहे हैं और मुझे लगता है कि कहीं ना कहीं अब इसकी जरूरत है। अभी मैं मनाली का देखने के लिए गया था, ये बहुत नुकसान हुआ। वहां पूरे मनाली में इतने पूरे लोग, जिधर देखो उधर गाड़ियां दिखती है। अब उसमें हाई राइज पार्किंग, ऑटोमेटिक पार्किंग करने पड़ेंगे। मैं अपने डिपार्टमेंट से बस पोर्ट, पार्किंग प्लाजा और उसके साथ कुछ कमर्शियल जोड़ना पड़ेगा, तो कोशिश कर रहा हूँ। ये होगा, पर कभी ना कभी लोगों के सहयोग के बिना नहीं हो सकता।
लोगों का सहयोग बहुत आवश्यक है। गडकरी जी, इन द लास्ट 10-12 मिनट्स यू हैव गिवन अस अ विजन ऑफ दैट how much we will have in terms of highways, but it's also clear that road safety will continue to be a bigger issue. I want to come to another aspect which is related to this great ambitious work that you are doing, which is costs. The government is bearing the cost, the NHAI is bearing the cost. You have said several times, और हमारे ही ग्रुप के मंचों पे आपने लगातार कहा है कि पैसे की कोई कमी नहीं है बनाने में. But consumer behavior also says that many people are not willing to pay those tolls, and they say that इतनी महंगी कर दी है सड़क पे यात्रा, 25 साल बाद तो इससे फिर 4-5 गुना हो जाएगा अगर इन्फ्लेशन इंक्रीज लिंक्ड इंक्रीज हो टोल में.
आपके कार्यक्रम में बहुत पहले कह चुका हूँ। अब आपने ये 5 स्टार होटल में कार्यक्रम लिया तो कॉस्ट है उसकी। रामलीला का ऑप्शन था मैदान का। वहां भी बैठ जाते, चाय पीते और करा। देखिए सर, इफ यू वांट गुड सर्विसेज यू हैव टू पे फॉर इट। अभी मुंबई पुणे के बीच में 9 घंटे लगते थे, अभी रोड में 2 घंटा होता है। तो 7 घंटे अगर गाड़ी कम चलती है तो पेट्रोल डीजल बचता नहीं है, यू हैव टू पे। अभी मुझे बताइए, आप दिल्ली से जयपुर अगर 2 घंटे में जाएंगे, अब 3.5-4 घंटे लगते हैं, आपका डीजल पेट्रोल नहीं बचेगा। और इसलिए अगर अच्छी सर्विसेज चाहिए तो अमेरिका में भी टोल है। अब मैं लाखों करोड़ के रोड बना रहा हूँ। दूसरी बात, रिसोर्सेज का कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं। और अभी तो मैंने तय किया है, मैं अच्छा हुआ आपके यहाँ ये बता रहा हूँ कि अब मैं गरीब लोगों के पैसे से रोड बनाना चाहता हूँ। मैंने अभी इनविट मॉडल में ये मुंबई स्टॉक एक्सचेंज में लॉन्च किया था, आप बैठे, तो 7 दिन का टाइम था और मैं पहले दिन 7 घंटे में 7 टाइम्स ओवर सब्सक्राइब हुआ हमारा बॉन्ड इश्यू जो हम इनविट में कर रहे थे। तो मुझे फोन आया हमारे मेंबर फाइनेंस का कि साहब जल्दी आओ, इनकी आप पद्धत होती है, घंटा बजा कर क्लोज करना पड़ता है। मैं आया दौड़ते हुए गोवा से और मैंने क्लोज किया, क्योंकि हम लोग 8.05% इंटरेस्ट पर ईयर दे रहे एश्योर्ड। फिर मैंने उसमें सुधार किया कि ये ईयरली नहीं, मंथली अकाउंट में जमा करेंगे। अब मुझे बताओ बैंक में फिक्स डिपॉजिट का रेट क्या, और हमारा 8.05 विथ NHI ट्रिपल ए रेटिंग। तो मैं अब छोटे लोगों से पैसे ले रहा हूँ, पैसे की कोई कमी नहीं। मैं आपको बताता हूँ, मैं तो आप तो पूछ भी नहीं सकते मुझे, मैं आज तक 10 साल हो रहे मेरे मंत्री पद में, मैं बोलता हूँ कितने लाखों करोड़ में मैं बात करता था। लोगों को पहले लगता था पॉलिटिशियन है, बोलते ही है। अब मैं आप जैसे लोगों को पूछता हूँ, मुझे बताओ कि आज तक 10 साल में मैंने बोला करोड़ों में कौन सा काम नहीं हुआ, मुझे बताओ। इसका कारण आई एम कॉन्फिडेंट, आई डोंट हैव मनी प्रॉब्लम। और आपको कल बताता हूँ, कल मेरे यहाँ अमेरिका से डेलीगेशन आया था पूरे इन्वेस्टर का। मैंने उनको चाय कॉफी पिलाया और मैंने बोला आप पूछने के पहले मैं थोड़ा कुछ बताऊं, आप गलत फहमी मत करना। मैंने बोला पहली बात, गवर्नमेंट गारंटी दूंगा नहीं। दूसरी बात, NHI के क्रेडिट पर पैसा देना है तो दो, नहीं देना है तो मत दो, समय खराब मत करो। तीसरी बात, आपको पैसा देने में मैं अगर आपको चाहिए तो आप बोले उस बैंक में एस्क्रो अकाउंट खोल दूंगा। आपको रिटर्न्स ईयरली चाहिए, 3 मंथली चाहिए, मंथली चाहिए, वीकली चाहिए या डेली चाहिए, रोज पैसा जमा करूंगा, रोज इनकम मिलेगा। एस्क्रो अकाउंट में पहला राइट तुम्हारा। और ये चीजें मान्य होगी तो मेरे से डिस्कस करो, नहीं तो मैं आपका बहुत आभारी हूँ। आप चाय पानी करो, नमस्कार।
तो उन्होंने पोहा खा के कुछ और बोला सर कि चले गए?
नहीं, वो खुश हुए, क्योंकि क्या है कि सब होता है रामायण, और फिर आखिरी में सवाल आता है भारत सरकार की गारंटी मिलेगी क्या। वो मिलाते मिलाते मुझे साल भर लगता है। आई डोंट टू वेस्ट माय टाइम एंड आई डोंट वांट टू कन्विंस टू एवरीबॉडी कि ये कैसे है। मेरे क्रेडेंशियल्स पर देना है तो दो, नहीं तो देखो मेरा अभी टोल इनकम 44,000 करोड़ है। At the end of 24, our total income will be 1,40,000 करोड़, और मैं रोड मोनिटाइज कर रहा हूं, और मेरा कोई प्रोजेक्ट इकोनॉमिकली नॉन वायबल नहीं है। मेरा पूरा प्रॉफिट का ही धंधा है।
एब्सोल्युटली। एंड एंड गडकरी जी, हमने भी पोहा खाया है घर में चाय के साथ, इसलिए मैं जानता हूँ कि
उनको मैं उनका रिस्पेक्ट करता हूँ। ये कैनेडियन फंड, पेंशन फंड अभी इनविट मॉडल में आए ना, पर वो आजकल क्या होता है कि जब फंड्स आते थे पहले तो बोलते गवर्नमेंट गारंटी, तो वो गवर्नमेंट गारंटी लेते लेते वो प्रोसीजर इतना बड़ा होता है कि उसमें रिजर्व बैंक और वो सब करके बहुत समय जाता है। तो हमारा AAA रेटिंग है भाई, देना है तो दो, नहीं तो हमारे पास पैसे की कमी नहीं।
Absolutely, and I can tell the audience and our viewers that in the
इवन आपको एक बात बताता हूँ, 2 बैंकों के चेयरमैन का विवाद हुआ, नेशनलाइज बैंकों का। ये बोल रहा मेरे 25,000 करोड़ लो, बोल रहा मेरे, दोनों मुझे फोन कर रहे हैं सर हमारे पैसे लो। फिर मैंने धीरे से बोला वो इतना इंटरेस्ट कोट कर रहा, तुम 0.5 कम करो।
I was going to say that in the first year of taking over, Gadkari ji cut through so much red tape in the bureaucracy, and I know he still does that. But Gadkari ji, the question that I have in the backdrop, as you know, you have yourself revealed and unveiled that edition of Business Today. This is the first time that Pradhan Mantri ji has given an interview on G20 in which he has spoken about so many things, and one of the things that I want you to reflect upon is the confidence that India has now, that it is not taking from the world, it wants to give to the world. 2 questions, sir. इतना कॉन्फिडेंस आप में आता कैसे है, आया कहां से कि इतना बड़ा विजन हम सड़कों का, परिवहन का बनाए? एंड सेकेंड, आपने अमेरिका और कनाडा का उदाहरण दिया, ये परिवर्तन भी कैसे आया है कि अब वो लोग आके हमसे बात करते हैं?
देखिए, पहली बात तो ऐसी है कि हमारी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट को, वाटर, पावर, ट्रांसपोर्ट एंड कम्युनिकेशन, इसको प्रधानमंत्री जी ने हाईएस्ट प्रायोरिटी दी। और आप तो बिजनेस के इसमें हो तो आप जानते हो कि इस देश में वाटर, पावर, ट्रांसपोर्ट, कम्युनिकेशन होगा तो कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट आएगी, इंडस्ट्री आएगी। कैपिटल इन्वेस्टमेंट और इंडस्ट्री आएगी तो गवर्नमेंट का रेवेन्यू बढ़ेगा और एम्प्लॉयमेंट पोटेंशियल क्रिएट होगा, और एम्प्लॉयमेंट पोटेंशियल क्रिएट हुआ तो ग्रोथ भी बढ़ेगी और गरीबी दूर होगी। और इसलिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में बड़े प्रमाण पर प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में हमारी सरकार ने प्राथमिकता दी। आपको याद होगा कि मैं पहले शिपिंग मंत्री था, तो मेरा बजट था 700 करोड़ का। कैन यू बिलीव, मैंने जो सागरमाला प्रोजेक्ट तैयार किया था वो था 16 लाख करोड़ का। और आप लोग जरूर कुछ प्रोजेक्ट का आप एक स्टडी करिए कि 16 लाख करोड़ के प्रोजेक्ट में 11 लाख करोड़ के काम पूरे हुए सागरमाला में, और जबकि हमारा केवल बजट था 700 करोड़ का, और 6,000 करोड़ रुपए 12 मेजर पोर्ट को प्रॉफिट मिला। ये अभी एक मैंने मथुरा का मॉडल कहता हूँ, जो जरूर आप इसको स्टडी करिए, कि जो सॉलिड वेस्ट और लिक्विड वेस्ट है, इसमें भी पब्लिक प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट संभव है। तो मथुरा में 90 mld जो स्लज थी, वही वाटर रिसोर्स मंत्री था, और हाइब्रिड एन्युटी में हमने टेंडर निकाला, त्रिवेणी इंजीनियरिंग करके कंपनी ने लिया, और मैंने एक ऐसा मॉडल तैयार किया कि वो शुद्ध पानी तैयार करेंगे, और वो इंडियन ऑयल जो बाजू में रिफाइनरी मथुरा की, उनने खरीदने की तैयारी बताई। मैंने उनको पूछा कि आप पैसा, पानी कितना लगता है, कितना पैसा देते हो? उन्होंने कहा उत्तर प्रदेश सरकार से डैम से पानी लेते 25 करोड़ देते। मैंने बोला आप 20 करोड़ दो, 5 करोड़ आपके बच गए, और वो पूरा पानी रिफाइनरी यूज कर रही है, और 40% सरकार ने दिया, 60% इन्वेस्टर ने लाया, और पहली बार लिक्विड वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट में भी पीपीपी मॉडल सक्सेसफुल हुआ। तो मुझे लगता है अभी मेरे पास स्टेट ट्रांसपोर्ट बसेस है। मैं इसके आप सब इन्वेस्टर को प्रार्थना करता हूँ कि मुंबई में एक डीजल की बस चलती है, पर किलोमीटर कॉस्ट 115, और जब हम सब्सिडी दे रहे थे तब हमारे नॉन एसी बस की कीमत आई 39 रुपीज पर किलोमीटर, और एसी बस की आई 41 रुपीज पर किलोमीटर। अब इलेक्ट्रिक बस जो है, जो लिथियम आयन की बस है, जिसकी कीमत 1 करोड़ 10 लाख 15 लाख है, वो बस अगर हम लाएंगे तो उसकी कीमत विदाउट सब्सिडी हमको 60 रुपीज पर किलोमीटर आएगी। और जो ट्रॉली बस है, जो केबल पर चलाएंगे, तो उसकी कीमत जो है वो 60 लाख रुपए आएगी। तो कैपिटल कॉस्ट कम है, और बिजली भी कम लगेगी। तो मैं भी पावर मिनिस्टर को रिक्वेस्ट कर रहा हूँ कि मुझे आप एनटीपीसी से सस्ते में बिजली दो, पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट इलेक्ट्रिसिटी के लिए, तो मुझे कॉस्ट और कम होगी। तो मैं अभी एक, मेरे पास रूरल ट्रांसपोर्ट मेरे पास है, और अर्बन ट्रांसपोर्ट यूडी मिनिस्ट्री के पास है। तो स्टेट ट्रांसपोर्ट के सब घाटे में है, वहां हॉर्न छोड़कर सब बचता है गाड़ी में। हाँ, गाड़ियां खराब है। तो मैंने सबको कहा कि आप इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ी एसी लगा दो, टिकट रेट 30% कम कर दो, ड्राइवर ऑपरेटर का और कंडक्टर कारपोरेशन का, और कंडक्टर भी नहीं, जो कार्ड होगा चढ़ते समय और उतरते समय कार्ड दिखाओ। देखो चोरी होती है डीजल में और टिकट में, दोनों निकाल दिए हमने, इलेक्ट्रिक की चोरी हो नहीं सकती। और जो कार्ड है वो लगाने से कंडक्टर जेब में पैसा, कार्ड मैंडेटरी है जैसे टेलीफोन का है। तो मैं आपको बताता हूँ, हर दिन एक्स्ट्रा अकाउंट खोल के एक बस 50,000 रुपए का डेली बिजनेस करेंगी, 250 किलोमीटर चलेगी, तो और बस वालों को 15,000 रुपए उसके लिए रख देंगे। बाकी के 35,000 में कंडक्टर, ड्राइवर, बाकी सब खर्चा होने के बाद भी 15-20 हजार प्रॉफिट होगा। तो इस देश में कम से कम 5 लाख इलेक्ट्रिक बसेस आज पब्लिक प्राइवेट इन्वेस्टमेंट से, जैसे दिल्ली टू चंडीगढ़, दिल्ली टू शिमला, दिल्ली टू जयपुर, अभी दिल्ली टू शिमला इलेक्ट्रिक बस चल रही है, और एयर कंडीशन लग्जरी बस और डीजल बस की तुलना में 30% रेट कम करके ये पूरा अर्बन और पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट इलेक्ट्रिक पे आएगा। तो ये कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव है, पोल्यूशन फ्री है, इंडिजिनस है, और कॉस्ट इफेक्टिव है, विन विन सिचुएशन है। लोगों के एसी में जाएंगे, 30% टिकट रेट कम होगा, और जो जिसको इन्वेस्ट करेगा वो भी पैसा कमाएगा। तो ये ऐसी बहुत सी बातें हैं कि अनेक फील्ड में हम लोग ये काम कर सकते हैं।
Sir, since you are talking about electric future, I want to ask you, 25 साल बाद पेट्रोल डीजल बचेगा इंडिया में? गाड़ी पेट्रोल डीजल की सब इलेक्ट्रिक हाइब्रिड होगा?
दुनिया का क्या होगा मालूम नहीं, पर मैं 2004 से बात कर रहा हूँ, और मेरा ये एम्बिशन है, ये बहुत कठिन है, डिफिकल्ट है, पर असंभव नहीं है। इसके बारे में मैं कोई एश्योरेंस नहीं दे रहा हूँ। मेरा बस चल जाए तो 5 साल के अंदर इस देश से फॉसिल फ्यूल को खत्म कर दे। और ये दिल्ली में कितना पोल्यूशन है, 40% पोल्यूशन दिल्ली का जो है वो पेट्रोल डीजल का, फॉसिल फ्यूल का।
खत्म कर देंगे यानी गाड़ी बैन हो जाएंगी पेट्रोल डीजल?
नहीं जी, जरूरत ही नहीं है। आपके पास गाड़ी है पेट्रोल की, इलेक्ट्रिक की कार ले लो, आप 30,000 रुपए खर्चा कर रहे हो, आपका खर्चा 2,000 रुपए आएगा। तो मुझे जरूरत ही नहीं मार्केटिंग।
बट इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ी महंगी भी है।
मैं आया हूँ अभी गाड़ी में, इलेक्ट्रिक गाड़ी है, हाइड्रोजन की गाड़ी है मेरे पास। हाइड्रोजन इज द फ्यूचरिस्टिक फ्यूल। और आपको बताता हूँ, पेट्रोल डीजल की तुलना में नो पोल्यूशन, इकोनॉमिक। अभी मैं 29 को टोयोटो की फ्लेक्स इंजन इनोवा लॉन्च कर रहा हूँ दिल्ली में। अब 100% इथेनॉल पर है। अब पेट्रोल का रेट है 120 रुपए, इथेनॉल का 60 रुपए, और वो कार 40% बिजली तैयार करेगी। टोयोटो के सब मॉडल आ रहे हैं इसमें, और 40% बिजली फ्री ऑफ चार्ज। तो पेट्रोल का रेट एवरेज माइलेज को हिसाब में लगाते हुए 15 से 20 रुपए लीटर आएगा। तो मुझे क्या जरूरत है इनको कहने की और आपको कि ये ले करके।
तो
हाँ, एक ही केवल जो आपका प्रश्न है, शुरुआत में जब नंबर कम होगा तो कॉस्ट थोड़ी ज्यादा होगी, जैसे जैसे नंबर बढ़ेगा कॉस्ट कम हो गया। अभी जैसे लिथियम आयन बैटरी, इसकी कीमत थी $150 पर किलोवाट पर आवर, अब $115 पर किलोवाट पर आवर आई। और मेरा विश्वास है कि आने वाले 1-1.5 साल के अंदर लिथियम आयन बैटरी की कीमत ये $100 पर किलोवाट पर आवर आएगी। तो मैं आपको बता दूं, पेट्रोल और डीजल की कार की कीमत सेम होगी और इसके कारण लोग इलेक्ट्रिक कार, हाइड्रोजन कार यूज करेंगे। आपको और एक अच्छी बात बताता हूं, मैं जब मंत्री बना तब ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री जो थी उसका टर्नओवर 7.5 लाख था, आज हमारा टर्नओवर 9.5 लाख करोड़ है। और दिस इज द इंडस्ट्री जिसने सबसे ज्यादा जीएसटी भारत सरकार को और राज्य सरकार को दिया है। और आज अभी ये इंडस्ट्री 9.5 लाख करोड़ की है। जब मैं मंत्री बना तो हम 7वें नंबर पे थे, आज हम तीसरे नंबर पर है। पहले नंबर पर चाइना है, दूसरे नंबर पर यूएसए है, तीसरे नंबर पर अभी जापान था। हमने जापान को पीछे डालकर हम तीसरे नंबर पर आए, जापान चौथे नंबर पर है। और मैं आपको बताता हूं कि हमको 15 लाख करोड़ की इंडस्ट्री बनानी है। 5 साल के अंदर हमारी ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री, यही आत्मनिर्भर भारत और प्रधानमंत्री जो कहते हैं कि हम प्रगति और विकास की ओर दुनिया में आगे जाएंगे, इसका प्रूफ है कि हम 5 साल के अंदर 15 लाख करोड़ की ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री बनेंगे और वर्ल्ड में हम पहले नंबर तक पहुंचने की स्थिति में आ रहे हैं। यही हर फील्ड में होगा।
That's a very important point, Gadkari ji, and one of the clear-cut headlines that you are giving us is that petrol diesel vehicles will get phased out hopefully in 5 years.
नहीं, ये एक बात याद रखिए, क्योंकि कभी-कभी मीडिया वाले फिर मेरे नाम पर अलग डाल देते, इसलिए क्लियर हो जाए। ये मेरा उद्दिष्ट है, ये मेरी इच्छा है और ये पूरा ही होगा ऐसा मैं नहीं कह रहा हूँ, मैं ट्राई करूंगा। आज तक मेरा 100% रिकॉर्ड ऐसा है
जी,
जो मैंने कहा वो हुआ है। ये भी होने के लिए इन सब की दुआएं मिल जाएगी तो हो जाएगा।
एक आखिरी छोटा सा प्रश्न, पिछली बारी जब आए थे तो मैंने आपसे पूछा था कि टोल से एग्जेम्पशन बहुत लोगों को मिल रहा है। आपने कहा था कुछ चीजों पे बात की नहीं जा सकती, देयर आर थिंग्स व्हिच वन कैन नॉट टॉक अबाउट। सिंस देन हैव यू हैड एनी चांस टू एंश्योर दैट एवरीवन पेज टोल इन दिस कंट्री?
सर, मैंने 10 साल में एक को भी कंसेशन नहीं दिया।
सर, बड़े-बड़े बोर्ड अभी भी लगे हुए हैं।
नहीं, ऐसा है, वो पहले मेरे पास मांगे पत्रकारों को टोल में कंसेशन, फिर पत्रकार के बाद स्वतंत्र संग्राम सैनिक, फिर दिव्यांग आएगा, फिर कोई बोलेगा शेड्यूल कास्ट को दो, फिर बोले शेड्यूल ट्राइब को दो, फिर ओबीसी को दो, फिर सरकारी कर्मचारी को दो, सबको दो तो टोल क्या होगा? तो ये मैं पेंडोरा बॉक्स खोला ही नहीं। मैं साफ बोल रहा हूँ, कोई कंसेशन मिलेगा नहीं। मैं आपकी बचत करके दूंगा, आपका समय बचेगा, आपका फ्यूल बचेगा, और इफ यू वांट गुड सर्विसेज यू हैव टू पे फॉर इट। पर एक बात आपको बताता हूँ, हमने अभी फास्टैग शुरू किया, हमारा 98.6% फास्टैग पेनिट्रेट हुआ। तो जो 78 सेकंड लगते थे वो अब 23 सेकंड पे आए। और 3 महीने के अंदर मैं सैटेलाइट बेस्ड टोल सिस्टम ला रहा हूं, जिसमें आपको कोई अटकाएगा नहीं, कोई रोकेगा नहीं। आप जहां से एंट्री करोगे वहां से आपके नंबर प्लेट और फास्टैग का फोटो निकल जाएगा, जहां से बाहर जाओगे वहां से निकल जाएगा, और आपके बैंक अकाउंट से उतना पैसा माइनस हो जाएगा। आपको हमारे पास आने की जरूरत नहीं, हम आपके पास आएंगे नहीं। और बहुत ही सिंपल मेथोडोलॉजी, कहीं रुकने की जरूरत नहीं, कोई तकलीफ नहीं, कोई रुकेगा।
गडकरी जी, मैं और नहीं पूछना चाहता क्योंकि और कहां से पैसा निकलेगा उसकी बात भी हो सकती है। आपने समय दिया, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर योर टाइम। राउंड ऑफ अप्लॉज फॉर नितिन गडकरी, द बिल्डर ऑफ मॉडर्न इंडिया।
थैंक यू।
Hello and a very warm welcome once again. Good morning, namaskar, adab. Thank you very much for being here with us. Nitin Gadkari ji, as always, a great pleasure to have you here with us. He's taken the pains to come only for this event, straight from the airport. So thank you very much for that as well. A full house here. And Gadkari ji, the topic is India at 100. So I will try and not ask you questions of the present and the past. One of your ambitions, Gadkari ji, as someone we describe here as the builder of modern India, is your Kashmir to Kanyakumari highway. But again, I will not ask you about that. Try and tell our audience here, when India is 100 years as a republic, what will our road infrastructure look like?
Actually, before end of 24, our national highway road infrastructure will be equal to the USA standard. So I am very much confident about it. For example, in Delhi, we are just working Delhi and out of Delhi part, that we are working on the project of 65,000 crores. I've got the list of every project, and I am confident that we will complete all the projects. After that, from Delhi to Dehradun will be 2 hours, Delhi to Haridwar 1.5 hours, Delhi to Jaipur 2 hours, Delhi to Chandigarh 2.5 hours, Chandigarh to Manali presently take 7 to 8 hours, it will be 3 hours. Then Delhi to Amritsar 4 hours, Delhi to Katra 6 hours, Delhi to Srinagar 8 hours, Delhi to Mumbai 12 hours, then Chennai to Bangalore 2 hours, Bangalore to Mysore is already completed, is 1 hour. And in which we are developing the road infrastructure, particularly starting from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. Just you take it from Manali. Before that Atal tunnel, from going to Rohtang Pass, it takes something 3.5 hours. Now it is 8 minutes. After coming with Atal tunnel, we are constructing 5 tunnels and roads up to Ladakh and Leh. After Ladakh and Leh, we are constructing the big tunnel in Asia, 11 kilometer, that is to be Jojila. 70% work has completed.